Last time for GVG, and we're doing it again. Blackrock Mountain. This one's going to be a little bit shorter, though. Don't expect 5 hours worth of content like we did last time. I certainly didn't expect 5 hours, and I hope to God it doesn't take us 5 hours for 31 cards. That would be miserable. But I'm here with Chakki, and I'm here with Ekop, and we're going to be covering the sets today. We're going to go basically in a pretty simple order. We're doing neutrals first. We're moving on to class cards after that. I want to do predictions broken down from mostly a competitive standpoint. That is our #1 priority. But then #2 is how this card works and sort of interesting ideas. And then #3, is this card something you can use in place of something you don't have right now? And that's basically mostly going to be my job. Because these guys are professional players and they're thinking about the competitive aspect of it. So hopefully we come up with some interesting ideas. If you guys have any questions about stuff, feel free to tweet at us. Well, I definitely want to read some questions if you guys have for them. It's at Ekop1337, at Chakki_HS, and at ThatsAdmirable. You can also just say stuff in the chat. If we happen to catch it, we do. If we don't, well, get wrecked. So, Ekop, Chakki, how you guys doing today?
I am doing great.
Ekop,
I am doing great too. Yeah. I was an idea just came to mind, but it's late for that now, I guess. Like to, as an introduction to this stream, sing the Blackrock Mountain theme.
I only practiced that one time, and it didn't go out so well. I'm not much of a singer, as much as I am a guy who just talks. So
come on, Admirable, you did great when I listened to you sing.
I cheered you up yesterday after your wonderful ladder run. It went so well for you, from what I understand.
Yeah.
All right, so Dragon Egg, 1 mana, 0/2. Whenever this minion takes damage, summon a 2/1 Whelp. Chakki, what's going on here, man? You talk about aggro. I mean, this guy maybe makes a couple 2/1s.
You could just make a 2/1 in the first place.
Oh, is that what 1 mana cards do? The 2/1s? So we have Worgen Infiltrator, we have Leper Gnome, we have Abusive Sergeant.
Right. The plus side to this, if you want to look at it from a positive point of view, is it's more likely to stick around because it'll take 2 attacks to get through. So, like, if you want to combo off with, like, Abusive Sergeant, but I feel like Haunted Creeper and Nefarian Egg do that job better, even though they're slightly more expensive, because a 4/4 is way better than a 2/1, and the 1/1s and the 1/2 body of the Creeper are a lot better. So I don't expect this card to get much play.
Ekop.
Yeah, I share the same opinion. Dragon Egg, if you just compare it to cards like Nefarian Egg, sure you pay less mana, but the payoff for that is not even relevant. One health minion that spawns out of the egg is just completely irrelevant and will not matter at all in any situation.
Sort of what I thought with this card when I first saw it was obviously Nefarian Egg. It's pretty much the thought that comes to everyone's mind. But I was like, oh, this works great with Wild Pyromancer. You can just keep triggering Wild Pyromancer and it kills all your cards. Alright, well, let's go back to the drawing board. Oh, you know what? This is really great against Rogue. They can Fan of Knives, and then they can just attack it first and then Fan of Knives, and they get a 2/1 out of it. And then sort of, I was watching someone talk about it, and they were like, you can just play a 2/1 for 1 mana. And I was like, of course you can play a 2/1 for 1 mana. Why am I using this card? So if you were too poor to buy the Naxxramas expansion, and this is something that does interest you, maybe this is your replacement for Nefarian Egg. But I would recommend just going back and finding the real thing and making it happen, because frankly this card is just not very good at 1 mana. A 2/1, it gets killed by 3 major hero powers, and even against something like Priest, it's like, what are you going to do with it, really? All this stuff withstands small damage you're going to be doing, and again, Wild Pyromancer is going to kill every 2/1 that gets made anyway, so just not doing much of an impact. So this one, as far as I'm concerned, is in the trash. Blackwing Technician, 3 mana, 2/4, Battlecry. If you're holding a dragon, gain +1/+1. This feels like it's real. It's like it reminds me a lot of Spider Tank.
Yeah, we thought a lot of Spider Tank when it came out, because we had never seen anything like that, like a 3/4, and 2/4s for 3 were considered pretty good. So now we've got, like, even slightly better if you have the dragon. It's a 3/5. Nothing past that. I mean, I think if you're lacking 3s in, like, a dragon-centric deck, and we don't know if those are going to be any good or not, maybe this is what you throw in. But I don't think it's that powerful.
Yeah, in general, I would say we have plenty of cards. First of all, we have plenty of cards that have this mechanic with the dragon holding. But the cheaper they are, the worse they actually are. Because the key to making this card powerful, obviously, is having that dragon in your hand. However, you do want that 3-drop on turn 3 to get maximum advantage out of it. Just because it's basically a vanilla card, right? It doesn't have any significant effect that you can apply well in the late game. So you want it as early as possible. The problem with an effect like that is, though, that you need the dragon in your hand, and you generally don't want a high-cost dragon at least, in your hand that early. So usually you mulligan all your dragons away every time. So it's less likely that you actually will have a dragon in your opening hand.
Yeah, I sort of feel the exact same way about you. It being 3 mana, obviously, 3 mana 3/5s are nothing to scoff at. That's not an easy to deal with minion early on. You pretty much hit the nail on the head, though, but that if you're holding a Dragon Gate +1/+1, a lot of the dragons you're going to be playing with, you typically don't want to hold on to while you have this card. Now, that being said, I do think that there is a pretty good argument for, if you're running a dragon deck, you probably have a lot of redundancy as far as dragons are concerned. I imagine you'll very often have one, and so this is a card that you will hold on to, and then with your first 3 draws being able to be there, plus whatever else you mulliganed away, it's pretty likely that you have a dragon card in your hand. I suppose my bigger question is, what class do you think is actually utilizing this best?
I'm not sure. Maybe like Warlock, generally the Zoo type decks, a 3/5 body for 3 seems good, but like how do you fit a dragon into that is the issue. I think Paladin is what people are really looking at to be dragon heavy after the new cards, and they don't really have any great 3-drops. They have Aldor, which is situational, and they have Muster, which is obviously great, but it's not technically a 3-drop. You'll play it on 3, but it's not like a 3-drop body. So maybe this card finds its way in there. I'd say Paladin.
Yeah, I see this being played in cards that in decks that actually play a lot of dragons, not only like the late game dragons, but also the mid game dragons. And Paladin is like one of the classes that has a mid game dragon, which we will see later on. And this is what makes Technician better in those kind of decks, I guess. If you play those cards like Hungry Dragon and the Paladin Dragon, then this card becomes way better. First of all, because you have more dragons, and because it's not as bad to have those dragons in your opening hand as well, I would say.
Yeah, I haven't seen all the cards yet. This is actually really genuine for me. Anything that was previewed prior to the big one today, I did see, but I assumed there was dragons pretty much in almost every single class. I'd be astonished if Paladin didn't have one. And Ekop, you mentioned that there's a Paladin later on, there's a dragon later on in Paladin, and Chakki, you said this fits well into Paladin. I actually really want to see this card now. So I'm just going to hurry up and skip to Paladin.
Also, don't get me wrong. Some people might say that I thought this card is bad. I actually think it's really good. I'm just saying, in general, the mechanic-wise, with the dragon holding, it's the more expensive cards that rely on having a dragon in your hand will be better.
Inconsistency is a sort of like a lookout for that when you're playing with this card, because there's a chance that you have this and you don't want to keep any other dragons in your hand, or that you get this and you don't have anything else to play. But yeah, I agree with you guys. I think it's a good card. A lot of people in chat are saying that it trades 1-for-1 with Shredder, which is kind of true. It's either going to absorb hero powers and throw your opponent's mana off, or they're going to have to invest something in it to throw their mana off, but it does kind of give you a little bit of a tempo edge when you're fighting against Shredder, so something to keep in mind moving forward to that card. Hungry Dragon, though, this one is one that I am excited about, because I love big minions for cheap mana, and I don't really have to innervate this one out if I don't want to. 4 mana, 5/6 Battlecry, summon a random 1-cost a minion for your opponent. Now, if I'm correct, I believe the average 1-cost minion is somewhere around 1 power and 2 health.
It's about 1.6 or 7 attack and about 2 health, yeah. And there's not many like extreme fringe cases like there's with Shredder. So like worst case is like Dust Devil, Flame Imp, and that's about it. And worst case for them is, a 1/1. Or 0/4 maybe. I don't know. Shieldbearer can be good sometimes, but
yeah, I think Shieldbearer here would actually be pretty darn good.
Yeah, it just blocks their guy. I think this card, at first I didn't like it too much. because I wasn't sold on the whole dragon archetype thing. I don't think you can just throw this in your deck as your new 4-drop. I mean, you can, but I don't think that's how we're really going to see it used. I think it'll go into dragon decks, and you talked about iterating it out. Well, I think Paladin might be the class to iterate this one out. So I think it'll go nicely into that Paladin deck.
Ekop.
I love the card. People are like trash talking the card pretty hard because it's it's like worse than Yeti or something like that, because your opponent gets a 1-cost minion, which kind of outshines, which might outshine the +1/+1 buff that it gets compared to a Yeti, for example. However, you don't necessarily have to play it on turn 4 as well, where your opponent might get better use out of his 1-drop. You can play it in later turns. The later the game goes, the better the card gets, because the later the game goes, the easier of a time you have dealing with that 1-cost minion that appears. So it just makes up to be a really good mid-game to late-game minion.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. There's two things that are really coming to mind for me. And number one is, how good is this card when you have a weapon already in play? And then number two, how important is the dragon synergy? Because if you looked at GVG, one of the most important aspects of cards like Mechanical Yeti wasn't its stats, it was the fact that it was a mech. And that's kind of true for Spider Tank, and it's kind of true for Clockwork Gnome, honestly. There's so many cards that mattered because of what type of minion they are, rather than what they actually did, because they synergized with stuff so well. With something like the Technician that we just saw, if you have turn 3 that guy and turn 4 this guy, you looking like you're in pretty darn good shape. I mean, you're getting way over budgeted on your stats for your mana.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, this is like the cheapest dragon besides the cheapest neutral dragon besides Fairy Dragon. So there's also a reason to be playing it, especially if you want to get that good synergy with the card that we had before. I'm really bad with names so far, but
let's go take a look at it real quick. It was Blackwing Technician. I'm always gonna call that Blackrock Technician. I know it.
Yeah, Blackwing Technician. That's Hungry Dragon makes that card just that much better.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you guys. I think that one of the biggest things about this, again, is going to be looking for how the dragon synergy works, and not so much about the downside of this card. Because when you have a 4-mana 5/6, there has to be a downside to it. You can't just make 4-mana 5/6s unless they're piloted Shredder. You have to have them actually be balanced in some sort of format and have some sort of idea, and offer some idea of counterplay. Like look at Pit Lord, for instance. It deals you 5 damage when it comes into play. So it's 5 damage is a little bit too much to take. I don't want to spell damage eviscerate myself to get +1/+1 on a minion, but giving my opponent a 1-cost minion, again, if I have a weapon in play, or if I have something that can favorably trade against stuff, it's really not that much of a drawback. So I'm not going to say that this card is really, really good, but keep an eye out for this one, because if dragon strategies become popular, it's almost certain this guy's going to be a part of them. Dragonkin Sorcerer, 4-mana 3/5. When you target this minion with a spell, gain +1/+1. To me, this strikes me as a really niche card that kind of screams, how much can I actually do with this?
I don't like it at all. It seems too combo oriented. I think very few combo-y cards actually end up working out. Like, people were thinking, you play this, you play Power Word Shield or Velen's Chosen. Well, if you can pull that off, let's just say on a normal Chillwind Yeti, it's already really powerful. And so the +1/+1 seems like kind of like a win more thing, where the first time you get the buff, you can pretty much read it as just +0/+1, because you could have had a Yeti in the first place, you could have had a Hungry Dragon in the first place, so you're really going to have to make use out of the buff, and I think it's too situational, so I'm going to say this card is bad.
Yep.
So let's look at the card first of all, stats-wise. 3/5 for 4 mana without the additional benefit is already standard. We see a lot of cards like that being played in the current metagame, like Vital Teacher, Sanded Shield Master, and if you get, obviously you can only play it in certain classes, like Priest, for example. Priest is probably the best class to use it with, because you have so many cards that can buff your minions. And I would say it might be really good in Priest, but as you've said before, doesn't really matter. The +1/+1 doesn't really matter. You can just buff other minions as well, which might have a better effect than just getting even more stats. So I don't think it will have that much of an impact on the current meta game.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with you guys. Like, obviously, one of the classes that's going to buff the most is going to be Priest. They have Ellen Chosen and they have Power Word Shield, which you can make good arguments for playing just on their own. But let's look at some other classes that have stuff like Druid, for instance. Like, Mark of the Wild becomes +3/+3 now on this guy only. Like, is that really that big of a benefit? It just seems so very average to me. Now, I think the biggest thing this has got going for it, honestly, is that it's a dragon. I think that's the biggest plus of this card.
Yeah, because you're never gonna want to play it, so it's always in your hand. Solid.
That's actually great dragons. You can always have a dragon in your hand. All you have to do is play
so
this guy,
bad, yeah.
and you never want to play him. Bam, we've nailed the card. Blackwing Corruptor, 5 mana, 5/4. If you're holding a dragon, deal 3 damage, like the dragon we just saw that you're never gonna play.
This card's obviously really good. It's Fire Elemental Light, and it costs a mana less, which can be really relevant. We're gonna have to see how like 3 damage is in the meta, because that's one of the things you really can't predict is once all the cards interact with each other, what's gonna be the common turn 4 play, what's gonna be the scenario on turn 5. Like, do they likely have a 3 health target? That might be true, might not be true. I think the main issue this card has is it's competing in a very competitive mana slot. 5 mana. I've made decks where you end up with 6 or 7 5-drops and you have like 12 candidates for that spot, so it's gonna have a tough time fitting into decks, but maybe it'll work along with the dragon decks. It's definitely a good card though.
Ekop, you said Fire Elemental, man. That's right up your alley.
Yeah, I love the Fire Elemental. It's one of my favorite cards in Hearthstone, and this guy is right up there as well. I was a little bit skeptical at first, but as I've said before, the dragon holding mechanic rewards cards that are a little bit more expensive, which this guy is compared to the Blackwing Technician. And yeah, the effect is very good. I was comparing the card to Bomb Blobber, for example. Here you obviously have to have a dragon in your hand to get any benefit out of it, but the effect is not random, first of all, and second, you also get a minion with better stats. So I think this card will be seeing a lot of play, considering we also saw Bomb Blobber see play. Yeah, I think the card is very good.
It's not only that you get the bigger body and you get a non-random source of damage, but you also, like, this can go to face, and I know that's not like a big deal, but I mean, when you're gonna play a 5-drop anyway, and say like, for instance, Sludge Belcher's not gonna be your best 5-drop that turn, or say like Sludge Belcher you just don't want it in your deck right now because there's just not a ton of aggro decks floating around. This guy feels like it fits the bill really well, and having 3 extra damage to face may not sound like that big of a deal, but if you do something like play Shielded Minibot, and then you Aldor Peacekeeper their guy, and then you True Silver Champion their next guy, and then you have this on 5 as your big 5-drop, and you get the 3 extra damage, like, suddenly you're putting together some pretty big numbers pretty quickly. And we keep talking about how Paladin seems like it's going to feel like it's going to be a dragon class. Every single one of these cards so far feels like it's fitting pretty decently into Paladin sans the 4-drop that doesn't actually do anything.
And also you said what you said about 3 damage, how much that will make an impact on the metagame when it comes to minion health. I think it will take a while until Pilot the Treader rotates out, so the 3 damage will be relevant in that regard, for sure. Yeah,
going back to Paladin and the 5 mana thing, I think that's truly where the problem lies. Not the fact that this card might not be good enough, but that there's, especially in Paladin, you've got Quartermaster, you've got the new dragon, you've got Sludge Belcher, Harrison, Lotheb, like, add them all up. You've got so many 5-drops you want to play, and you can't fit them all in. So you're going to have to, like, focus in your deck somewhere, and this card may or may not make that cut.
Yeah, I that's definitely something else that was concerned. Like, when Naxxramas was coming out even, was how many 5-drops there were, and when you have that many cards competing at that slot, you do need to think about, you know, well, are 6-drops going to be better? Is it better to run some 7-drops in this spot? How many 5-drops do you actually need? That's a really good question. And for Druid, it feels like you kind of want infinite. But for pretty much every other class that doesn't have access to Innervate, you kind of need to balance your curve in a certain way. So where this actually fits in to a deck, that's actually a really good point to make. And it's going to be a matter of whether or not you need something like this. But I think Piloted Shredder is pretty much one of the biggest arguments going forward for a card like this, is that card is very likely to stick around in the metagame for an extremely long time, and this is certainly one of those cards that can help answer what's going on. Grim Patron, 5 mana 3/3. Whenever this minion survives damage, summon another Grim Patron. Now, I've seen stuff like people saying Bouncing Blades with this guy, you know, Wild Pyromancer with this guy. I do want to clarify, again, we have a ton of 5-drops at pretty much every single slot along the way. Is this the one you really want to be playing with? There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with them, but how much of a competitive impact does that have?
I don't think much. I think it's another too cute combo. Like, you're trying to be you're trying to do too much. Like, you're playing 2 cards that are pretty bad on their own. If you play like Bouncing Blades. Bouncing Blades is fine, but if it was good, people would be playing it, and they're not. So it's fine, but you're playing a suboptimal card with another pretty mediocre card. I mean, this works with Warsong Commander to clear very low attack threat boards, which is strange because Warriors already have ways of doing that. And that seems to be where people's focus is for this card, is Warrior, because they have ways to damage their own minions a lot to spawn more of these guys. And I don't know much about Warrior, but I don't think it's going to fit in there well. I think especially with some of the other cards that came out in this set, people are looking at Bouncing Blades and Grim Patron as like a Quartermaster combo for late game.
Grim Patron.
Whatever.
That's definitely my kind of card.
And so they're looking to have that as like an 8-drop where you spawn a bunch of 3Xs. Well, I think that's just weaker than playing some of the new legendaries. Like, I think Warrior's just going to stick to what it's done in the past and not try and play this card.
Yeah, I agree. This card is too janky. Obviously, people will try to attempt to combo something with this, but the cards that you actually have to play, and this card as well, on its own it's not good, and the cards that you have to combine it with are also most likely not that great, which is why you just won't see it play in high-ranked level of play, obviously, because why make your deck worse just to have a combo that might, like, 1 of 10 games work? Who knows? Yeah,
janky is a really good word for this, and that's actually one I haven't heard in a long time since I started playing Hearthstone. It's more of like the Magic and WoW TCG lingo coming into effect there. But janky is like a really good word for this, where when this card works, your opponent's going to be like, what the fuck just happened? But the problem is making it work. Like, if you can find a way to make it work, you've got a really good argument on your hands here. The biggest thing that I see maybe making this card work is Despite. Like, if you play this on 5 and then use your second charge of Despite into, say, like a Sludge Belcher, you're going to have a 3/2 and a 3/3 versus the 1/2 Slime. And that's got to be, like, dream scenario. Where
they have to
Druid's
clear
like,
it.
yeah, where the Druid's like, oh, I can just swipe it. And he's like, oh, but then the 3/2 is going to make another 3/3. And they're like, well, I'll just hero power that one. And they're like, that's fine, but then you have the 3/3 contesting the 1/2. There's a lot of problems that can come into place with this. But again, janky is the right word. There's so many 5-drops that are competitive right now. Is this one you really want over, like, say you're not playing a dragon deck. Is this better than Bomb Lobber? Is it better than Lotheb? Is it better than Spectral Knight? Like, do you have to really think about all those things? So there are some cool ideas you can do with it. Again, the biggest one I'm seeing is with a Despite charge, and then hoping your opponent doesn't have super efficient answers to the next 2 of them, and going from there. But don't expect this guy to be making, like, a huge impact for it. It's more of like a combo card. It's kind of challenging you to see exactly what you can do with it, rather than, like, screaming, I'm going to win tournaments. Volcanic Drake, 6 mana, 6/4, costs 1 less for each minion that died this turn. Now, historically, cost modifiers have been very, very dangerous in card games, and it's no exception to Hearthstone. Innervate and Preparation are 2 of the best cards in the game. This guy has a conditional attached to him, but the condition is just kind of running your minions into theirs. So, Chakki, maybe for you, SM Orc, never trading. Maybe it's not for you.
It's definitely not going into Face Hunter, I can tell you that.
This card feels like it's pretty darn good, though. It's like it's to me, it seems like it's stepping one way ahead of the curve.
I can see this card in some decks, yeah. I'm not sure what decks yet. I think people will have to kind of figure that out. Like, there's definitely going to be a lot more thought process involved in how you make your board now and how much you trade, how much you go face, because now there's even more punishment for going face, which is if I let my opponent do the trading, which is normally a good thing. When your opponent does trading for you, that means you get free damage on their face. Now it's not free because you're reducing the cost on their conditionals, which there's more than just this card for this effect. And so I think ultimately, if this card sees any bit of play, the nicest thing it'll do is there'll be more in-depth decision-making within games and more thoughts to be had about normally just automatic decisions.
Ekop.
I really like this card, just because this, as you said before, those cost-reducing effects tend to be pretty overpowered and are not as easy to balance. So let's take a look at it stats-wise. It's a 6/4, so let's say it would have been a 4-drop, then it would be above average compared to stuff like Lost Hall Strider or something like that. So if you just, all you have to do is trade one of your minions into one of your opponent's minions, and then you already have a above average 4-drop. But where the card really shines is when you actually can clear the board and just get a free Drake and free cards. Like a free 6/4 is a really good tempo swing, and this is where the card will just be really, really good.
Chakki.
I don't know which deck it fits in the best so far. My initial thought was Warlock, but we will see, I guess.
Chakki, I think you really hit the nail on the head on the competitive side of this, which is typically when your opponent's trading, you get free face damage. But this is really impacting that decision now. Like,
it's like another Molten Giant, basically.
Yeah, like that's sort of exactly what I'm thinking. And I saw some stuff in chat. 6-0 said, Force of Nature, Volcanic Dragon. And if your opponent has a bunch of 2/2s in play, and you play Force of Nature, then run into all their 2/2s, you just drop this guy for free. And then my mind started racing as soon as I heard. I was like, oh my gosh, you could just Hellfire stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, you could just run into their Piloted Shredder and then run your other minion into a Piloted Shredder. And then this guy's
good.
Oh my gosh, this guy's so cheap now. We're finding ways to fight Piloted Shredder without actually having to nerf Piloted Shredder, which is really exciting to me. But yeah, this card seems like it's really, really dangerous. It's like a cheaper kind of Molten Giant is a really good way to look at it. Granted, it's not necessarily the damage aspect of Molten Giant, but getting this card to 0 is not too difficult of a task. Again, even if you get him down to like 4 mana, he's above average, which is 1 minion trade. And if you can get this guy to like 3 or 2, you're looking at some really explosive turns with this guy. This guy seems... Wow, the more I'm thinking... I thought this guy was good before, but now that I'm thinking about it, this guy seems busted.
Yeah, you can definitely set up some unfair scenarios, and your opponent will have to consider when he knows you're playing this card. In a scenario where he would usually go face, does he trade your minions just to prevent a cheaper Drake?
Yep.
Who knows?
I think it's gonna make a lot more gameplay decisions.
All right, here we go. We get a full board. We drop a Sea Giant. We trade all our minions. We play 2 Volcanic Dragons. That's the new deck I'm doing day one.
Then what if they Shadow Flame back and develop their Volcanic Dragon?
Ah! 6 mana, 6/6. Draconid Crusher. Battle Cry. If your opponent has 15 or less health, gain +3/+3. Is that a buff? Or is that a self-effect to this card?
I mean...
I guess the good news is they BGH this so they don't BGH your Dr. Boom.
Yeah, definitely. It's a dragon, which is nice. It kind of fits into, like we've been talking about the dragon archetype thing. There's not many 6s, so like this fits in nicely. It's pretty solid stat line. You can justify playing it over like Piloted Sky Golem because it's like a dragon and stuff. I think otherwise it's a lot weaker, but the buff, again, it has a downside like we talked about against BGH. The buff, when you get it, I think like you're pretty ahead basically. Normally, I would say over 50% of the time. When your opponent's at 15 or less health, you're winning. So having a 9/9 is kind of like irrelevant.
It's a true hunter mentality, by the way.
Yeah, well, sometimes you're losing when they're below 15, and it's like, yeah, I'm out of cards. But I think you'd almost rather have the safety of a 6/6, like we were talking about. Is that a buff? Is it a nerf? Like, the safety of the 6/6 is nice compared to the, like, you'll see people with Van Cleef a lot. They'll make it a 6/6 instead of like a 10/10, because even if 10/10's more powerful 70% of the time, they don't want to lose 30% of the time. So I don't know. I don't know where to go on this card. It could be okay in Dragon decks. Otherwise, I don't see it seeing much play.
Ekop.
I can see this card see some play. The optimal case, the optimal deck which it would fit into is a deck, a mid-range deck that's more on the aggressive side. So I would say something like maybe like a more aggressive Paladin, or even Druid. Or sometimes even Warrior, I guess. The thing with this card is obviously you need to go face more than trade, so you get the benefit as early as possible to just make this card a bigger threat than it already is. If so, you can just easily close out the game with this. You cannot fit this card into an aggressive deck. For that purpose, it's just too expensive. So yeah, the best spot for this card would be an aggressive mid-range deck.
Yeah, I agree with both of those opinions. But then, of course, we just talked about Volcanic Dragon maybe being like a nerf to generally just going face overall, because you want to prevent your opponent from getting cheap Volcanic Dragons. And
yeah, you don't have to play those cards together. I mean,
yeah,
both those cards reward different strategies.
Right, they do, and that's sort of the point I'm getting at, though, is, again, I think Chakki really nailed it with the dynamic of just going to face all the time may have drastically changed with something like Volcanic Dragon. And so when I take a look at a card like this, and I'm like, oh, we have to get him to 15 health, I'm like, well, we don't necessarily want to do that because we don't want to be giving him favorable trades and the ability to play his Volcanic Dragons out for cheap. I'm like, tough. But yeah, I can see this guy getting some play. I mean, a 9/9 for 6 is nothing to scoff at. Fel Reaver definitely saw some play early on, and I think the drawback on Fel Reaver was a little bit too hefty, especially when you couple it with the fact that Big Game Hunter is really splash hating the card. But you can just play this card as a 6-mana 6/6. That's still pretty darn decent. I mean, something like at that point though, like, am I gonna just want to play Frost Elemental or something?
You want Piloted Shredder?
Yeah, like that's the other thing too. It's like, how big of a difference is Dragon gonna make to this card?
Sky Golem. Rather,
yeah, if this card ends up making a big difference, I think it's because it's a dragon.
It's because it's a dragon.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Something we're consistently seeing. Keep an eye on this card, but don't be surprised if it doesn't make it there. Emperor, how do you say this?
Thaurissan?
Someone give me a phonetic spelling on this. 6 mana. Thaurissan?
I always said Thaurissan when I played like WoW, but I guess there's no I at the end.
Yeah. 6 mana 5/5. At the end of your turn, reduce the cost of cards in your hand by 1. Wow, that seems really darn good. Oh my gosh.
This card, okay, so people are like calling this the Trogzor of the set because everybody's so hyped about it. Like, we were all like on this Trogzor hype train on GVG, and the moment we saw this card, we're like, what? Like, this card's insane. And that's how it seems to me too. Like, I mean, I'm thinking I'm gonna put it in Freeze Mage because like it opens up flexibility, it opens up big combos. Freeze Mage regularly has like 8 or 9 cards in hand. So you look at this effect, you read it as pay 6 mana, gain like 9 mana. Like, what? That's insane. And it opens up crazy combos. People are saying it might bring back decks like Miracle. I don't think it's going to... I don't think you want to look at it as like this can make bad cards good. It makes good cards better. So I think this might just go into every deck. And basically, anyway, like very aggressive decks, you probably don't want it. Any deck where you're holding a large amount of cards around turn 6 or 7, and you can play this and get -1 on all of them, like Druid maybe, it seems really good in. This card just seems really good.
Yeah, I'm willing to say this card is this adventure's low thap. So
Yeah.
it just fits so well into so many decks, and so many decks can make use out of it. Obviously, loads are a little bit better because it fits aggressive decks as well, protecting your board. This guy, however, doesn't really reward playing it in aggressive decks, obviously. But in mid-range slash control slash combo decks, this card is gonna be really, really good. It puts a very good minion on the board, and you get immediate value out of it with that end of turn effect. And if it sticks around for a turn, then it's getting even better.
It's just, the first turn I think is really the biggest one, and then the second one is like your opponent I think will lose at that point because they couldn't kill a 5/5 on turn 6 or 7, whatever.
Oh yeah, the fact that it's a pulsing effect, I didn't even touch that, but the fact that like you have to deal with this, and it's a 5/5, so it's not like the worst thing in the world to kill, but there's no card that reads kill a 5/5. There's no big game hunter for 5/5s, so you have to dedicate resources just to dealing with this, and then you pass to your opponent again, who now has initiative with a slew of -1 mana cards. Like, that seems insane.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, like, what I'm doing right now is I'm just kind of putting it into decks that already exist, and it's something like Warrior, this feels like it can be extremely good. Like, Shield Block Shield Slim's now 2 mana. Whirlwind Execute is free. Your Fiery Orax costs 1 mana, and when you're going into your turn 6, being able to play something like a Sylvanas and then chopping down one of their minions that either is left over at 3 health or something that's still a small drop, like, all those things seem very relevant to me. And just even in something as silly as like Warlock, like if you play this on turn 6, you're looking at Shadow
I play
Flame.
this in Handlock easily.
You're looking at power Overwhelming Shadow Flame costing 3 mana instead of 5 now.
Jiraxis cost 8.
Yeah, like
power.
all that stuff matters so much. And
Also,
wow, this guy, he seems so under budget.
And it's crazy hard to play around too. Like,
how do you play around it? Yeah.
Yeah, like, okay, so first of all, you have to mentally memorize, oh, my opponent had 7 cards when it pulls, now he has 7 cards that cost 1 less, and it's like adding even more hand complexity game, which is something I kind of dislike. A lot more stuff to keep track of with like pen and paper. Some people use programs, and on a tournament level, you can't. Some tournaments don't even let you use pen and paper, and so makes for situations that are harder to play around, but like when your opponent has 6 cards that all cost 1 less mana, like what do you respect? What don't you respect? Crazy shit ends up happening. You're like, how was I supposed to know you had Jiraxis for 8 into, something for 2, and you just get screwed, man.
Yeah, the best part about this combo is it allows players to make use of those insane combos that are just not possible anymore because of Blizzard nerfs, for example. Remember, for example, a kid gets, for example, mentioned on Twitter the good old Alexstrasza charge, right?
Right.
And
you can Alexstrasza charge on turn 10 with this.
Wait. Yeah, okay, so I just realized this card, there's a perfect way to describe it. So everybody's gotten double Innervate, Force of Nature, double Savage Roar before. 5-card combo. That's happened to everybody before. And this card basically introduces that mechanic to every single class at random times, where you just get bullshitted and you're like, what? Like, that shouldn't be possible. And before
Yes!
it wasn't.
Punish them! Emperor Thaurissan.
So,
Thaurissan? Is it Thaurissan? Thaurissan. Reels posted phonetic earlier, I remember it now. Thaurissan.
So what I wanted to say is this card rewards the combo decks the most, basically. So if you're going for like the Warrior combo that I mentioned, if you're going for Force of Nature combo, if you're going for Miracle Rogue, if you're going for Freeze Mage, cards that decks that need an absurd amount of cards, Malagos Shaman, stuff like that. It just gets really insane in those decks. Sure, you play a minion that doesn't have an immediate impact on the board or disrupts your opponent. So your opponent basically gets a free turn to kill you or do whatever he wants. But once you get past that turn or the 2 turns after that, then you're in a really good spot in that game and are able to win much faster because of your combo pieces being cheaper.
Wow. 10 out of 10, man. This card's great. And look, he's even got the lightning in his hands and everything. He's just the Emperor.
I would
Straight
say
up.
this is like one of the top 5 cards in the set.
Oh,
And
and
it fits into so much stuff.
and he's fun to play as well because when he enters play, I saw it on the Hearthstone stream today. When Blizzard people played him, he says something like, "By the power of I don't know, Deathwing or whatever, I have the power."
I can't wait to see this guy's animation. This guy's great. If you guys did not want to get Blackrock before, you're gonna need this card. It's way too good.
It's the first week too,
and it's also oh my gosh, first week, and it's
this
also
card
just,
comes out in 2 days.
it's fun as heck, man. I can't wait for that guy. Rend Blackhand, 7 mana, 8/4, battle cry. If you're holding a dragon, destroy a legendary minion. I'm actually really torn on this because I see 3 things working against it. Number 1 is conditional holding a card. Number 2 is conditional opponent has a legendary. Number 3 is conditional does my opponent have a big game hunter or a swipe.
Or a swipe.
Or a flame cannon.
I think this is one of those cards where it's hard to predict because it's so meta based. We don't know like how relevant cards like Ysera are going to become. Like, is the game going to be more late game focused? Is it going to be more aggressive focused? This card's obviously way weaker than Big Game Hunter overall, but it has a slightly wider range. Because if you look at most decks, almost every deck plays a legendary, but people would like dance around Big Game Hunter, so you could even see people building Handlock without giants. Like, they'd play Twilight Drakes, they'd put in like Sneeds, and Kel'Thuzad Life Coach did that. He would play no Big Game Hunter targets. You can't really play no Rend Blackhand targets. You know, if you want a legendary in your deck, you want it in your deck, for sure. And so, in that way, if he counters something that's good enough to play him, he'll be in your deck, in like very control-y decks. He's too expensive, and he has too little health, so he's not going to be Big Game Hunter. You know, he's not going to be popping up as a tech card in tons and tons of decks, but if you're looking to go late game, and one of the things that wrecks you is like, you know, oh, I don't have an answer to Ysera, you can play Rend Blackhand.
You can compare this card best to Black Knight, because it fulfills the same role basically in terms of clunkiness and effect, especially when it comes to the effect in this current meta game. Black Knight will always find a target because every mid-range and control deck runs Sludge Belcher, and Rend Blackhand, just like Black Knight, will always find a target because every deck runs legendaries, except for Grow decks. But those decks also don't run Taunters most of the time. So Rend Blackhand, just like Black Knight, will be they will be basically on the same power level, I would say.
This feels like a piss your rich friends off kind of card. Everyone's got a friend that owns every single legendaries. Like, when they're not like the top of the level like tournament competitor style mentality. You have that one friend who's spent like $750 on Hearthstone and he just has everything, and you're working with like Freeze Mage, with like Water Elementals, and you're like, sick, I just unlocked the Lotheb wing for free and I have a Lotheb now. This is a piss your rich friend off kind of card. I don't feel like it's a coincidence that this card's stats seem so strange to me. I feel like when this card was being played during like a testing and balancing period, it was just like, this guy's insane. Like, you can just blow games wide open. And again, you can't Big Game Hunter everything. It's starting to get to the point now where there's so many cards to Big Game Hunter. It's like, when do you Big Game Hunter them? Is Big Game Hunter enough of a swing? All those sorts of things are kind of coming to mind for me. And I do agree with you. It's very much in the vein of Black Knight, and it's so meta-based. Like, when people are playing lots of legendaries, this card becomes way better in dragon-style decks. But when you're playing against something like, I don't know, turn 2 Haunted Creeper, if this guy pops up on turn 5 or 6, you're like, oh shit, this is a dead card.
Right. Almost like mind control in that way. Like,
yeah, true.
Alright,
I think the card is powerful and it will see play, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's going to see play too, which is where. Like, I'm not sure exactly how powerful.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of like legendaries that my opponents very often play, and like Lotheb comes up a lot, which obviously Lotheb's a great target for this guy. Sylvanas is obviously not a very good target, And Dr. Boom's not the best target in the world. I mean, you have an 8/4 body on the board and you took out a 7/7, but the Boombots can... I mean, one Boombot can actually kill this guy. And that's not going to happen every single time, but it certainly is a possibility. So how it lines up, I think, is going to matter a lot with what legendaries people choose to use going forward and what ends up being staples and so on and so forth. When it's more suited towards just, you know, kind of powerful stats style things, I think he's a lot better. He does kill Emperor Thaurissan, though. So maybe there is some value, like your opponent.
He also kills Chromaggus, which is really hard to deal with.
Well, we'll see Chromaggus, I'm assuming, coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, the fact that he costs... Wait a sec. The fact that he costs 7 is also a big factor, because there are not many legendaries, obviously besides Dr. Boom, that are worth playing in that slot. There are not many 7-drops that you actually see play besides Dr. Boom.
Yeah.
So I see this card see some play for the foreseeable future simply because it costs 7 as well. If it cost 8, it would be unplayable, I would say.
I think I'd agree with you. The 7 is already kind of questionable, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think it could go down to 6 and still not be overpowered.
Well,
I think it'd be a lot better. But...
That's certainly a really big Lotheb hit then.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if it went down
Rend.
to 1 mana, it'd be a lot better.
Yeah, it'd be busted. Chromaggus, though, this is the one you were just talking about. 8 mana, 6/8, so not big game hunterable. Good news. Whenever you draw a card, put another copy into your hand. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That seems really, really... like,
I think it seems really good.
Yeah, I mean, if you have, like, an Acolyte out, and you just play this guy and then run your Acolyte into there, whatever, you're like, oh, I just drew 2 copies of Grommash, sweet!
Yeah. It's basically if you have anything that draws a card for either 2 mana or already on board, then you're getting value. You know, the card replaces itself. It's a 6/8 body that they have to deal with. It's like Emperor in that way, where it's not just a one-time thing. You have to kill this. It's, you know, or else it'll just keep accumulating value. And if you get 1 card, not only does it draw a card to replace itself, it does that in a way that no other card does. It duplicates it. And so your opponent, again, it's another thing where your opponent can't play around that very well. I wonder how they're going to deal with that with positioning in hand, where these people using, like, trackers can see, okay, that's what he Chromaggus. And as soon as he plays it, you'll know, okay, he's got a second copy of that in his hand. And I wonder, like, how Blizzard's going to deal with those kind of effects coming up more often with stuff like Emperor and this card, and more cards where their hand is predictable. Is that going to be a big deal in competitive play, like learning to track your opponent's cards, like where they're moving, and being like, that's the Chromaggus card, that's a -1 mana card, that's a spare part, that's from Web Spinner. Like, it's getting ridiculous at this point.
Yes! Make it more ridiculous. Well, I don't want to be able to track it. I don't want anyone to be able to track it. I want to be able to click a button that shuffles my hand.
Right. That's what I would like, ideally, because there are programs that people are using that they can track it, and it's creating a disconnect between people that aren't using this third-party program and people that are. And ideally, there should just not... Either Blizzard supports it and it's like in the client, or it doesn't exist because you can shuffle your hand like in real life.
Yeah, I had this question in chat that I want to touch on real quick. Someone asked, put another copy of Chromaggus in your hand or another copy of the card. It's another copy of the card that you draw, you put into your hand, not another copy of Chromaggus. So, specifying that. And Ekop, it looks like you have some things to say.
Of course, I always do. I absolutely love this card. It's a really good dragon. As far as I know, the only a dragon that costs 8, right?
I'll have to skip ahead again. This is a new one to me. I didn't see all the cards today. I was out doing stuff, and as soon as I got home, I started working on getting this together.
Yeah, but generally the dragon costs like 9 mana, right? So this is nice to have at least one dragon that costs 8, just to get more variety. And also the effect is very, very strong in certain decks, like for example Warrior, like Paladin, I would say. I definitely am looking forward to play this card, simply based on the unique effect that it provides. And yeah, its stats-wise is also really good. It doesn't die to BGH, and sure, it has to survive a turn in order to get the effect, but when you do, depending on what deck you play, it generally should be pretty good.
Yeah, I'm tending to agree with you guys. I think one of the biggest things this has going for it is that it's an 8-drop that's relatively strong. It's something your opponent definitely has to deal with, or the card advantage can snowball out of control, and it's not big game hunterable. So it's like they have to actually dedicate a lot of resources, again, to killing it. This isn't one of those like, oh, well, if Chromaggus becomes a problem, I'll just add in a second copy of BGH into my deck, and I'll snipe them out, no problem. And at the same time, you're not just hating on cards cards like this, you're also hating on like Molten Giants, Mountain Giants, Rend Blackhand, anything like that. This guy, 8 is a little bit, I feel like it's a little bit much. You know, because once you get to the turn 8 point, a lot of times you're looking at turns where you can start setting up lethal with stuff, like, you know, setting down your second Death Spite, attacking their face, and having, you know, threatening Grommash from hand. You're moving into Force Nature Savage Roar turns. All those things kind of come into effect when playing that. So I see this being when the game is more slower paced and kind of based around fighting for the board very consistently. That's where I feel like he's fitting in best. And outside of that, tend to use cards that are putting a little bit more pressure on your opponent's life total, rather than their ability to fight the card advantage battle. Nefarian, 9 mana, 8/8, Dragon. Battle Cry, add 2 random spells of your opponent's class to your hand. Initially, I saw this card and I was like, why is this 9 mana? But the more I started to think about it, the more it strikes me as like a faster Ysera.
Faster Ysera?
Yeah, like you get the stuff instantly, it's an 8/8. You know, Ysera's drawing stuff like Laughing Sister, and granted, sometimes you're going to get something like an Inner Rage, or you're going to get, you know, like a Light Bomb and be like, well, I can't cast this, or whatever it's going to be. But again, we're seeing a consistent pattern here, which is if people are playing this many cards, and when you take into account something like Volcanic Dragon, that maybe minion trading is better than actually just going for your opponent's face and allowing them to get big Volcanic Dragon swings. All these things are really starting to take into account to me, and I feel like fighting the card advantage battle, maybe Chromaggus is actually better than this guy. But, you know, having access to your opponent's spells can throw them off of games. Like, you can't prepare for someone Nefarianing? Is that a verb now? You can't prepare
Nefarian done, kid.
Shadow word Nefarian. You can't prepare for your opponent stealing your own spells. It's just not something that you take into consideration when you're building a deck, really. And because you get everything instantly, even if this guy does get BGH, you still got more than 1 card of value out of it.
Yeah, the problem is, though, you don't get the cards like in Thaurissan. You get random spells. You don't even, you just get first of all, the downside is that you get spells and not class cards. Like, for example, minions. Generally, class minions are better than class spells usually, and also, there's just so many crappy spells for each class that you can get, so the card can just get 2 dead cards, like, oh yeah, look at this, I'm just gonna get Deadly Poison Blade Flurry once again, or... so...
Dang it, I need a weapon!
just priest things, right? And also, if you compare it to Ysera, which is obviously the first comparison that comes to mind, you get the Brick Dragon for 9 mana, and you get cards off of it. The dream cards from Ysera will always be good, no matter what. And the cards that Nefarian will get are not necessarily going to be good. And stat-wise, I would also prefer Ysera over Nefarian any day.
Chakki.
Yeah, I think this card is another card that really depends on how, like, value-based the meta is. From the hunter perspective, this card is just terrible. You're just like, this card's never going to see play against an aggro deck. You're just going to crush them. A 9 mana 8/8. Like, the card gives you, I think, like, on average, maybe, like, 17 mana to play. You have to play the 9 mana body, and then you have to play out the spells, which might not even be relevant. So against faster decks, this card just gets blown out. And I do think, like you said, it's worse than Chromaggus, but I think maybe the question is, do you play both? Like, can you afford to play both? I think Nefarian probably won't make the cut in a lot of decks. Like this Paladin deck we kind of have in our minds. I think 9 mana going down to 7 mana for an 8/8 that gives you spells. It's too clunky and slow, in my opinion. I'm not a huge fan of this card, but I think you'll see it. You'll see people try it out. I don't think it's around to stay, though.
Honestly, though, when you have the option between Nefarian and Ysera, which one do you pick for your deck?
So just like for a warrior deck or a priest deck, you probably...
Any deck.
Yeah, but those are like the decks that would play these in the first place.
Dragon, boys. Dragon may be the type. Oh, no, did you say it's a dragon? What am I talking about?
Yeah,
exactly. In a dragon deck, I think the dragon decks are going to like curve out. I think they're going to have Chromaggus because that card's great. And then that card combos well with another paladin card later on.
Yeah,
but I think I really don't like the 9-mana dragons. Like in a mid-rangey deck.
Yeah.
Which is what Dragon's going to be. Dragon is not a control deck, right? We've established that. All the Dragon cards are very like stat efficient, which means you just want to beat them up. So Nefarian and Ysera, I think, fit more into like the control, very late game value oriented style, and I'd probably prefer Ysera. I mean,
yeah,
that's
all right. I'm sold. The thing I'm looking forward to most now is seeing Reynad steal Totemic Mites. How do you? Is this just exactly how it looks? Majordomo.
Yeah, Majordomo Executus.
Majordomo Executus. He's suited up and he's ready to file some TPS reports that were submitted to him this morning. 9-mana 9/7 Death Rattle. Replace your hero with Ragnaros, the Fire Lord. What?
Admirable hasn't seen this.
Yeah, I haven't seen these cards. Anything that got revealed today on 3/30/2015, I have not seen yet. So, what on earth does this mean? Do you just actually become Ragnaros?
Yeah, you do.
So at the end of your turn, you deal 8 damage.
No.
Oh.
Your hero power becomes 2 mana. Throw a Ragnaros fireball for 8.
Does it replace your life total or anything? Does it give you a weapon?
Oh
my
god. 8.
To 8! Oh, come on!
Well, it's Ragnaros.
Ragnaros used to take 40 people to kill, and now it takes 2 eviscerates.
Now it takes Boombots. You can Alexstrasza yourself back to 15, because Alexstrasza ignores your health cap. This is the first time we've had this kind of collision. But we do have confirmation from Blizzard. Alexstrasza ignores your health cap, sets you to 15. But I think that's like too expensive, 18 mana to do that. The one scenario people have said where you can set this up is like you're playing Warrior, you have 30 armor, and you play this card, and then you become Ragnaros!
Yes!
Is that really going to happen? And when you have 30 armor, aren't you just going to win anyway with these new value cards that have come out? I think this card is actually awful. It's going to be funny.
Way.
There's going to be a lot of funny situations happening with this. Everybody's always dreamt of becoming Ragnaros, but it's not going to be played in competitive. I'm
what
sorry.
was it quote? I sexually identify as a Fire Lord.
Yeah. I don't know how many of the viewers sexually identify as Ragnaros the Fire Lord, but I'm sure there's some.
Wow, this card's great. It's funny, actually, I did an interview at Gfinity about Blackrock Mountain, and at some point in there, I predicted that they were going to reprint Ragnaros. I was like, this is sort of like a handout to people who, they've been playing the game for a while, but not everyone can afford every single card in the game. It doesn't make financial sense for everybody. And I was like, I think they're going to reprint Ragnaros. I think it's just going to be one of the things you get. I was kind of right. It's kind of like reprinting Ragnaros.
It's even better, you become Ragnaros!
Yeah, you just are Ragnaros at this point.
Okay, so we're getting somewhat confirmation from Reels, who works at Blizzard, and the chat is saying that your armor goes away when you turn into Ragnaros.
What? Why does your armor go away? Oh my god, Reels, why?
Okay.
God
this
damn
card
it.
got even worse.
Thanks, Jay Wilson. Holy crap. This is...
Oh, I can't believe there's already copy pasta going on from...
So what you do is you set up 7 armor smiths. 6 armor smiths. You turn into Ragnaros, and then you get the armor stack in.
We get armor smiths with our piloted shredders and everything. I don't know, it's kind of a cool card, but when I hear that your armor goes away, that really makes me sad. Are there any death rattles that gain HP? Is there anything we can use with that? I can't think of anything. Really, armor smith's the closest thing to it. Alright, so if you get into a big top deck war, maybe this guy's valuable. Oh, you can execute your own Majordomo. Artosis taught me that. Alright, we're moving on to class cards now. Gang Up, where this is rogue cards first. 2 mana, choose a minion. So, I'm assuming it means choose a minion you haven't played. Shuffle 3 copies of it into your deck.
You can choose any minions as well.
Choose any minion on the board.
Yeah.
I don't know. You're losing a card when you cast this. That's really the thing that's standing out in my head. Is that if the game goes long enough, you will see an impact from this. But just outright, it doesn't actually do anything.
This is one of my favorite cards in the set. And last set, Shadow Bomber was one of my favorites. So my favorites don't necessarily mean they're good. But
hey, I played Shadow Bomber the other day, man.
I could see like a really very defensive kind of late game value control fatigue rogue, like some weird combination. It's going to take a long time to find a deck list that works, but you have to play a lot of draw because, again, like Admirable said, you need to draw into the cards for it to matter, and you're losing cards when you play Gang Up, so you need to have like Prep Sprint, maybe Cold Lights. You need a lot of draw. Gang Up makes it so you always fatigue after your opponent, basically, unless you're playing a mirror match, but Gang Up is going to be insane, going to fatigue, and then you need to make sure you survive against aggressive decks, which means healing, AoE cards, which Rogue has a lot of. You play some taunts, and then you have Gang Up and like Chromaggus to ensure that in the late game you can outvalue your opponent. And this deck might work. It might be too cute to work. But it's a really interesting idea. It introduces kind of a new archetype. It gives more validity to kind of this Mill Rogue, which was a fun deck before. And I like the fact that this card potentially introduces a new archetype into the game.
I can see 2 uses for this card. Either you're gonna win every fatigue battle with it, just putting it inside a fatigue kind of deck. But what I would rather want this card to do is being played in a deck that actually allows you to draw your whole deck. So not necessarily in a fatigue-based strategy, but in a strategy where you actually want to draw a lot of cards, like Rogue usually does with Prep Sprint and stuff like that. So you can actually get multiple copies of that minion that you really want multiple times. For example, like SI7 Agent or I don't know.
Maybe I'm going big with this card. We're not getting SI.
Maybe Killbot, maybe like anything. You can. The imagination is your limit, right?
Right.
The thing that I'm seeing about this card is more so design space and where they're going with it. And when you have a card that's creating more copies and adding to your deck, that's something I don't actually think we've seen that before. Like the closest thing to it, I think, is Recycle. Puts an opponent's minion back into their deck.
And Malorn.
Yeah, those are the only 2 things that really go back in your deck. And this
is way better than both.
Yeah, this is like adding up that possibility now, where now it's like, people have wanted a graveyard. People have wanted, is there like an X? Like basically everything, like, coming. I'll use a magic term here for a second. There was, it used to be called remove from game, and when stuff was removed from game, it couldn't be used anymore. But there's plenty of stuff that shuffled back from your graveyard into your deck, and this is really like the closest thing that we have to that right now.
Yeah.
So utilization of design space, that's really an interesting thing to me. And then, of course, I mean, you guys pretty much nailed it on the head. Something with Cold Light, like a deck with Cold Light Oracle, I feel like is going to be the deck that most often plays this, because you're able to cycle through everything. When it gets down to later stages of the game, you've been prep sprinting, you've just been drawing lots of cards, say, like Gnomish Inventor, Azure Drake, whatever you're choosing to draw cards with, you're not hitting that fatigue stage as early on. And now we have a natural counter to Chakki's terrible lineup that ruined Conquest.
You can do some really crazy stuff, like with Chromaggus, this card, and like Shadow Step on a Cold Light, where you can like Ekop said, you run out your deck to make sure you draw into the cards. You gang up something really good, you play Chromaggus, and then you draw into those cards and you like 6 copies. Okay, you're not losing that game if that happens.
This is a combo-oriented card, like for
Definitely.
sure. Yeah, this is.
Well, that's Rogue. That's Rogue's identity. And they're giving it, like, a new way to combo, which I think is really awesome.
Yeah. So, outright, this isn't a card you just throw in your deck. This is something that you have to actually figure out a way to build with it. And that's a difficult task. Albeit one that I'm certain there's some people out there that are up to. But I'm going to copy their deck lists off of a website and go from there. Second Rogue card, Dark Iron Skulker. 5 mana, I almost said Stalker. 5 mana, 4/3, Battle Cry, deal 2 damage to all undamaged enemy minions. How many backstabs is too many backstabs?
Maybe like 4. If we're talking the actual card backstab, which we're not really, but it's 5 mana, right? I can't see.
Yeah, 5
5
mana,
mana,
4/3.
like again, 5 mana is a really competitive spot, and this has pretty weak stats. It dies to the new Fire Elemental card for dragons, where you do 3.
Yeah.
I think the game could somewhat transition away from lots of small dudes to lots of very mid-rangey dudes, like the dragon deck that all the dragon cards, none of them have like 2 health. They're all very bulky cards. So this card you kind of have to combo with something else. You go, and it's 5 mana, which is clunky to combo. Like this into a this costs 7.
Fan.
Yeah, but so does
I don't
Azure
think-
Drake, right?
I don't think it's. Yeah, you can compare it to Azure Drake as it's like an Azure Drake fan without having to pay for the fan.
It seems really good against aggro decks.
Like that's where it fits in. So we're just gonna have to see where the meta goes with aggro decks. It's not a bad card. I don't think it fits in immediately, but maybe how the meta swings, it could find its way into the rogue deck.
Well, big shout out to the Trump boys here. Trump just hosted us for 18,590
Oh, baby.
viewers. So welcome, guys. You have missed some of the review. We're close to the halfway mark, but if you guys miss any of this, it is going to go up on YouTube when I'm done with it. So, stick around if you guys want to see some more of this stuff, but we're moving forward from here. And again, a big thank you to Trump for the host here. I'm so excited to review cards.
Thanks, Trump.
I hope Trump's here watching. Notice me, senpai. Ekop, I pretty much agree with almost everything Chakki just said, but I'm seeing a little bit more punishing effect in this one. Where like, if your opponent's playing a strategy that is dedicated to playing lots of small minions, this really, really punishes that. But if you're not facing that strategy, it is kind of underwhelming.
I think the battle cry in general will be really, really strong. The only thing that bothers me about this card is the 3 health. So I would like it more as a 3/4, I guess, but that's just a small issue. The battle cry in general will be really good. Often enough, you just don't even want to play cards like Fan of Knives that much because I don't know. I generally, for example, didn't like playing Fan of Knives that much. I would be much more excited playing a card like this. Chakki mentioned the Azure Drake Fan of Knives, and this is like the free Fan of Knives, Azure Drake Fan of Knives combo.
Yeah.
Basically. I don't know. I think the effect has a lot of potential. Obviously, as you said, it punishes aggro decks, which is very important. Often rogues can struggle with that. And yeah, but even against other decks, it will have its use. Especially in the late game, you can damage everything and then finish it off with something like a Blade Flurry, with something like a Fan of Knives even. You can just deal so much damage with this card. It's insane.
Yeah, the more I'm thinking about this guy, the more I actually really like it. And the thing that I'm looking at is, say, like, Rogue Mirrors, for instance, very often something like Violet Teacher ends up being a big force. And you can't go crazy on Violet Teacher, again, because you're thinking about Fan of Knives. But with a card like this, like, say you have a Poison Dagger in play, and then you play this guy, and you kill all their tokens, and then you deal 2 damage to their Violet Teacher, and then you use your dagger to finish the Violet Teacher. I don't know, I'm starting to like this card. The more I think about it, the more I think this card's actually really good. Like, you can't ignore damage attached to minion bodies. It's like, that's one of the most important things in the game. And when you make the comparison like you just did, I mean, you pretty much nailed it with, if this is an Azure Drake and a Fan of Knives, basically in one card. Like, where's the downside of that? I'm not saying...
The downside is you can't play it as an Azure Drake. You can't just say, okay, I don't want the Fan of Knives, I want the card. You have to take the AoE effect over the card.
So the downside is that your opponent actually has to have a board position.
Right, and
the other downside, obviously,
Rogue already has... Rogue's weakness has always been, what happens when my opponent kills my stuff and doesn't give me stuff to tempo out? Because their strength is killing your board for free and developing. But when all you have to do is develop, like, the one class that counters Rogue the hardest is Warrior, because they just kill your threats, and they don't have small threats for you to backstab.
Okay.
Which is what this card does, and so it definitely fits the flavor of Rogue, but there's a reason that, like, Azure Drake is the card. It's because it gives you a way to just develop the board on your own terms.
And the other downside, obviously, being they have to be undamaged minions. So most of the time, it will be just small minions dying to this, and bigger minions that have already been damaged, for example. This card doesn't work against that. So in that regard, something like As a Drake Fan of Knives would be better. But I think this card will find its place.
Yeah, I think this card's going to see play. I think it's going to see a lot of
It'll definitely see play.
Yeah, I think this card's actually really... Like, the more and more I think about this card, the more I'm like, you know what? The ability to kill... Like, if your opponent has... Like, say they spit out, like, a 3-2 from their Piloted Shredder, and then they have a Sludge Belcher in play. And again, having a Poison Dagger up is something that you're very often going to have. You know, playing this guy and then blowing up both those minions... that just seems like such a big swing to me. I like it a lot. I think it's going to see a lot more play, and it's not a particularly exciting card, I don't think, but it definitely is going to get the job done. Free damage is never something to be ignored on a body. Lava Shock, Shaman card. 2 mana, deal 2 damage, unlock your overloaded mana crystals. Now, this card I've seen get a lot of attention, and the only thing I'm wondering is how much overload can you... Like, when you have locked mana crystals, I'm assuming it's going into your turn, you have to have locked mana crystals.
It unfills both. So it'll unfill up your next turns and this turns.
Okay, so like, say if on turn 5 I cast Feral Spirit, and then I Lava Shock something, those 2 locked mana crystals are going away for next turn.
Right.
Okay.
And so if you, like, let's say it's turn 7, you come in, you're overloaded by 2, you go Feral Spirit, and then you Lava Shock, you get 2 more mana now because you unlock those 2, and you unlock next turn.
Oh wow, that's really cool.
So you basically remove all the lock symbols from
all the locks on the board.
Whether or not they're actually locking mana crystals or prepared to lock mana crystals next turn.
Right.
All right.
Cool. That's actually that makes it way better. I was curious about that before.
I still don't like it. I think that the current best Shaman decks, and Shaman's in a really like weird spot where it's really getting hated out of the meta by stuff like Aggro Hunter. As far as like competitive goes, when Shaman shines, it shines a lot because it beats up on like Warrior and all these late game decks. It struggles against Paladin as well, but Lava Shock right now the deck isn't playing much Overload. Like from what I've seen talking to like the top Shaman players, Lightning Storm and sometimes Feral Spirit, but Feral Spirit's getting phased out quite a bit, are like the only Overload decks. The only Overload cards in the deck, and maybe like Neptulon.
Is that the case though? Because you don't have something like this.
It might be, but like, okay, so there's another card coming up after this which has Overload. It's very insignificant Overload, but it could lead to maybe like the Unbound Elemental style of play coming back,
which I preferred.
Where you want to play Lightning Bolt, because right now you look at like these top Shaman lists, they play Rockbiter over Lightning Bolt because they don't want to lock up their mana in the early turns when you're dealing with these small threats, because it makes your turns awkward. But when you bring back Unbound Elemental, you want Lightning Bolt, you might want like Crackles in your deck, and then you can maybe fit this card in. I don't think this card's that powerful because you have to pay the 2 mana. So you're basically, you can almost read it as like a backstab if you're overloaded. It unlocks your crystals, but you had to pay anyway.
Obviously,
the 2 damage.
Yeah, obviously the biggest
And
scenario. Obviously, the biggest scenario is when you have locked mana crystals going into your turn, and then you can cast something that's going to lock next turn, and then you can cast Lava Shot. That's really the biggest value you're getting from this card. Not entirely sold, but I do still like it. Ekop, though, you're the Shaman expert here.
Well, not really anymore. I haven't played a Shaman in a long time, passionately.
You're a Shaman expert, embrace it.
Back in the day, though, when I played a lot of Shaman, I really enjoyed playing those Overload cards, even Earth Elemental. And obviously Shaman has access to a lot of powerful Overload spells, which don't see play just because they have Overload, basically. They just screw up your curve so much, which is a really important part of the game. Just having a really good curve and hitting the best play with the mana crystals available to you, which Overload obviously prevents you from doing. Lava Shock kind of wants to counteract that. However, you still have to pay too, so it's kind of the same thing as overloading yourself. Dealing 2 damage in the process, though, this is the question if this is actually significant enough to make this card worth playing. So this is what it all comes down to. If the 2 damage is enough to make it worth being an overload replacement, basically.
It's really going to be one of those things, again, I think Chakki pretty much nailed it with, is this going to encourage the Unbound Elemental style of play to come back? And I definitely think it can. And you said there's another card after this that has Overload, so before I make a strong stance on this one, I think this one's usable, but not, like, overpowered or anything like that. But it depends on what kind of shaman you're going to play. Again, if you're going to be sticking more towards the value side, obviously you're not going to be overloaded as much, you're probably not going to play Lava Shock. 4 mana, 3/6, Fireguard Destroyer, Battlecry, gain 1 to 4 attack with Overload 1. So this minion is gaining 1 to 4 attack, is that what that means?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so this guy is somewhere between 4 and 7 health, or 7 power. Wow, that's really good.
Yeah, it is.
Wow, that's really good.
It is a really solid card. It's a 4/6. It's at least a 4/6, which makes the Overload one basically give +1/+1, right? And because usually you have a 3/5 for 4 mana in that stat department, right? And being a 4/6 makes the Overload makes the Overload +1/+1. But the more you get, the better it gets even. So if you get a 7/6 for 4 mana, this is just insane.
Yeah.
I actually think I want to get a 6/6 though.
You do want it.
Obviously.
6/6 is basically optimal.
This guy's 5.5 power on average, so this is 11.5 mana worth of stats for 4 + 1 mana.
Well, it's not.
Yeah, and
11.
the Overload one doesn't hurt that much. Like Overload one is
It's-
irrelevant most of the time.
It's basically equivalent to the Hungry Dragon Pit Lord stuff, but instead of having like a disadvantage, the disadvantage is the Overload, which isn't a huge deal, especially not going into your 6th turn. Right now, Shaman's are really focused on 5 drops, but this card kind of changes that because it's so powerful that you'll want to focus less on 5s and more on 4s and like 6s. And then you overload on your 5th turn and don't really care.
Because you're fire elementing on 6.
Right. You're going to fire Ellie on 6. This guy's really powerful. He does a lot of damage and he has no efficient answers. And so...
Yeah, you're not just going to truce over this guy and run a 1/1 token that you made into it.
Right.
You can't use the second charge Deathbite to kill this guy. You have to have another minion to run into it as well. Wow, this is like... I love this card now. Like, this
card,
is everything I wanted in a 4-mana minion.
It's gonna work. It's gonna work really well. Like if we go back to like my double Doomhammer deck, where your goal isn't to go very late game. It's to beat them up. Like you want to kill them really fast. This card would go perfectly in that deck because you just slam like a 5/6 for 4, and you get overloaded. Who cares? You know that deck had a lot of overload in it, and you played around it.
And this is great with the Unbound Elemental. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
This is everything Shaman wanted, I think, in a card.
Yeah, it's definitely taking a different approach than last set, where you got Neptulon, and I think Power Mace is still pretty good, but it's taking a different approach than the value game. But honestly, this card might be powerful enough that you just put it into your value Shaman deck as an early minion.
What do you think of that, Ekop?
Yeah, for sure. The stats make the card worth playing. I mean, 6 health for 4 mana is just insane. It will always trade 2 for 1, and yeah, that's all. That's all there is to it.
What a great card.
We've seen 4/6s like Spectral Knight being at 5 mana really good, obviously, and this card just can get even better than that. Because you have to think about it as a 5 mana card basically because of the overload, right?
Yeah. 4
This
+
thing's
1.
gonna tear up Arena, by the way. Somebody just mentioned it's a common, and I'm like, oh, that doesn't matter. And then I'm like, oh wait, kind of does. Like
That's something we haven't
this
been touching
thing
on.
destroys Arena. Holy.
Wow, this guy's great. Look out for this one. I expect there to be a lot of Fireguard Destroyers destroying their opponents in the near future.
Yeah, don't run Fire Guards, because whatever that is, getting destroyed.
Twilight Whelp. 1 mana, 2/1. Battlecry. If you're holding a dragon, gain +2 health. Priest seems to be a class that really needs to focus on getting an early minion and then being able to utilize its hero power by keeping those minions safe after trading. And Twilight Whelp is, if you're building a dragon archetype, really striking me as a, obviously Zombie Chow is a really, really close comparison to this card. But we said this earlier, how often are you going to have a dragon card in your hand during the opening game? Because typically when you have dragon cards, you want to be able to play them in the early game. So are you keeping them in your hand when you have them early on?
If you have, like, if you run this and dragons and you draw them both in your opener, you probably keep them. But, like, let's say you have a hand and it's, you know, 2 cards that you want to pitch 100% and a dragon. It's like, can you really afford to keep a dragon for the if I draw Twilight Whelp possibility?
Oh, you can.
and, like, the other thing is, there's already Zombie Chow in the game, which for Priest isn't a huge downside. Sometimes it's an upside with Auchenai.
That's right.
Can you realistically run Northshire Cleric, Zombie Chow, and this card? I don't think so.
I don't know. I disagree. I think you can run those cards. But I'm curious to hear your reasons after I hear what
You have to have dragons as well.
Well, I want to know what Ekop has to say, and then I'll make my argument to you. Ekop.
Yeah, I've said it before with the earlier dragon holding mechanic cards. The cheaper they are, the more useless they get, because you usually don't want to have those dragons in your opening hand. Except for Fairy Dragon, I guess. So maybe you get the dream Twilight Whelp with the Fairy Dragon. But in general, Fairy Dragon isn't even good in Priest, so it doesn't matter.
What I'm looking at with this card is that with Priest, like, your early game consistency is like one of the biggest things that you don't have. Like, some of your best starts involve having a 2-drop, like the Gilblin Stalker, and then being able to follow it with Velen's Chosen, or it's having Northshire Cleric, Injured Blademaster, and Circle of Healing. And this isn't necessarily helping that consistency issue too much, because again, you do have to have a dragon card in your hand, but redundancy in your early game effects is so important for Priest because it basically wants to do the same thing every time. It wants to get a minion on board, it wants to attack your opponent's minion with that one, and then use its hero power to heal it. And this is helping give you extra effects to accomplish that goal.
I think it's too inconsistent. Like with the dragon effect, and you already have one, so you want to play. Like I don't know if there's room in the best.
You could be right. Yeah, I mean, it might not. There might not be room for it, but you know, this is one of those cards that strikes me as you're going to have to build decks and see how they work. And it also is going to be a little bit metagame based. Obviously, if people rotate away from running stuff like Mad Scientist in every single deck, and they're focusing more on, again, the mid-game strategies, trying to get big Volcanic Dragon turns, this guy does become a little bit worse. But
a card like this, I would say, is really good if there's other mechanics involved. For example, if dragons had cards like the Mechs did, for example, the cards that synergize with Mechs, right? For example, Tinkertown Technician or Goblin Blast Mage. If dragons had cards that synergize with dragons like this, then Twilight Whelp would be pretty decent.
Right.
But
the issue is this card might as well not even say dragon, because the dragon mechanic is holding. And for 1 mana, every time you draw this card, you want to play it. So you're not going to be holding it.
if you have 2 of these guys, he does buff himself.
But the second one doesn't get the buff.
Well,
like,
semantics.
yeah, if you when we get more mechanics, for example, mechanics that require having dragons on the board, then this card would be obviously pretty good. But for now, no.
All right, well, I think it's playable. It definitely, I think, with Blackwing Technician, can do some stuff. You know, both those cards encourage you to have dragons in your opening hand. Both those encourage, I think, priest classes using their hero power to heal minions that already have health and vision stats. 2 mana, Resurrect. I haven't read the text yet, but I can guess what this one does, and I'm pretty excited. Summon a random friendly minion that died this game. Yes! This is exactly something that I wanted in Hearthstone, was to be able to bring back dead minions.
Yeah, same here. I like the card.
And it's random! It fits so well! Hearthstone!
Esports!
So...
Can't wait to get those Northshire Clerics back.
Yeah, you want to run powerful minions in your deck. The goal is to have as powerful of a graveyard as possible before you play this, which kind of goes against, like, Northshire Cleric, that Whelp we just looked at, Zombie Chow. I think if you resurrect Injured Blademaster, you get a 4/7, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, you definitely do.
Yeah.
Because the battle cry's not going to happen.
And, like, ideally you want to have really powerful cards in your graveyard. So, like, the dragons we looked at earlier, like Chromaggus, would be insane to get off of this. And maybe just the fact that there's even a chance that can happen late game is enough to play this card. It's a random effect, but you can stack the randomness in your favor through deck building. You might have, maybe you put in like Holy Smite over Zombie Chows, so you can deal with their board early still, but late game your Resurrect isn't weaker. I'm not sure, because I don't play much Priest, and this is like a completely new effect. So I think the jury's still out on this one. Could be a really powerful card, like in the mid-late game even.
Yeah. Ekop.
Yeah, I really like this card. The potential for this is immense. Obviously, you have to play. You have to build your deck around it, but also you have to adjust your playstyle a little bit. Imagine though, you just play your Blade Master on turn 3, and have 2 Resurrects in your hand. This is so insane.
They just
Do
kill
you want to kill it?
I don't
Oh
wanna.
yes, I can kill his Blade Master. He can't heal it up. He didn't have a circle
What
for
an
it.
idiot.
Yes.
You can get back piloted shredders in this guy too. Yeah, I like this card, actually. That's a really good point that you think you made. Being able to Holy Smite early, and then just play a minion that you don't mind dying in the early game and then having
Probably
Resurrect.
just build your deck more around this, and that's
Just-
another
just
reason
don't play-
why I think if this card's good, Twilight Whelp's not good in the same deck.
Yeah, you just
Sure.
don't play. You just don't play those cheap minions like Zombie Chow. I mean, some priest we've seen priest decks before that just didn't rely heavily on those early game drops, like Zombie Chow and Gilblin Stalker or whatnot. Like we've seen more controller priest decks that rely on spells to clear the board early. And when the first minion you play is a good 3-drop like Dark Cultist or Blade Master, then Resurrect on turn 4 is already a pretty decent play.
Or Deathlord.
Now all we need is a reliable way to discard something from our hand, and then we can cheat stuff into play.
That's the question I did have. Is discarding considered dying?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
No, it's not.
Maybe it's not.
I don't think it is. I feel
I
like
didn't read the text. It says died specifically.
yeah, I feel like died implies that it had to be.
Well, you can
ignored.
test that with Felreaver. That's like the one card that discards in this game, besides tracking, which obviously is cross-class.
That's actually interesting.
If tracking in this existed and the wording worked, it'd be pretty sweet. You could do some cool stuff, but
It doesn't work like that though, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think it literally has to die.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it literally has to die. The card has to come to life from electronics and become a real-world entity before you can resurrect it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, kind of a cool card. I think, again, this is, for me, it's really hitting the design space aspect of it, which is, this is stuff we haven't done before. So now that we've opened up the window to that, look for stuff in this same vein in the future. Like, now we can bring back dead minions, we can shuffle cards back into the deck, we can make more copies of stuff to shuffle in the deck. All this stuff.
The game is getting crazy.
Yeah, the game is definitely getting crazier, and random is what I like. Sorry, professionals, but that's just me. Warlock cards, Imp Gang Boss, 3 mana, 2/4. Whenever this minion takes damage, summon a 1/1 Elf. Now, Dragon Egg, I don't think Dragon Egg was very good, and we were sort of all in agreement on that one, but this one seems like it's way, way, way better than Dragon Egg. Mainly
definitely
because it's a
agree on
2/4.
The stats from this card are obviously 2/4. It's standard. 2/4 for 3 mana is standard vanilla stats. However, when you take damage, which this minion will at least once, you will get the 1/1, which makes this card kind of a 3/4/3/5, depending on what your opponent has.
It's like a Harvest Golem.
So already it's on par with Spider Tank, if not even better.
Yeah.
And considering that it's a demon and it spawns demons, it fits demon strategies very well. Demons, like the demon decks that I've been playing at least, they didn't run many 3-drops, so this fits in perfectly.
This card is arguably just better than Spider Tank and Warlock because it makes your buff cards better. So you can run stuff like Defender Vargas, Power Overwhelming, Abusive Sergeant way more reliably, which you can just put into this Demon Lock deck. You don't even have to run Zoo. And this is such a great turn 3 drop because if they kill it, you get a 1/1. Chances are with 3 mana they can't kill both it and the 1/1. It's immune to swipe basically because when they swipe it, I would assume you get the imp after the swipe resolves.
Yeah, it's damage.
And so it's almost like a better Harvest Golem for Zoo because you don't care too much about the extra power on the damage golem, but the extra health on the front body and the fact that you can spawn multiple ones really creates some awesome scenarios. I think this card's actually really strong and will go in a lot of Warlock decks.
Yeah, the demon lock, that's actually a really good point too, is because something that deck seems to be missing is a really solid 3-drop. And not that I'm excited to put Imp Gang Boss into play off of my Void Caller, but I certainly am excited to have this guy into play while I have a Mal'Ganis in my hand and then play a Void Caller. Void Caller might as well just say put a random Mal'Ganis from your hand into play, by the way, because I just never see any other demons paired with it. But yeah, he's like fitting in the same vein. And and then you know, like you said, Harvest Golem. This is like, it's basically a better one of those because of it has the extra health on the front end, and it can proc multiple times.
And it's a demon.
Yeah, and, you know, Zoo is one of the decks that Harvest Golem fit into best. And it would not surprise me to see this guy kind of go into that exact same style of deck and go forward from there. I think this guy's great. Just a really solid card. Demonwrath, 3 mana. Deal 2 damage to all non-demon minions. So we can make all of our imps with the Imp Gang Boss, and then we can Demonwrath.
I'm not a huge fan of this card. I think you already kind of have like Hellfire and Shadowflame as your board clears, and 2 damage is, I think, significantly weaker than 3. If this were like 2 mana, I think it'd be pretty good.
Hang on, this can be coupled with stuff like Voidwalker and Flame Imp. Like that, I mean, not damaging your own guys is a big difference. Like when you're looking at dealing damage to your opponent's board versus only dealing.
It does proc your eggs.
Yeah, and it does that. Yeah, I see this card going places.
Okay, this could go into Demon Lock, but
the reason why this card might be so insane is the mana cost, actually. 3 mana for 2 damage to the whole board is not something to overlook, considering also that this gives Warlock more variety in terms of AoE, because the other AoE spells both cost 4 with Hellfire and Shadowflame. So with a Demonwrath you get more variety, and sometimes in certain decks or situations it might be better than Hellfire or Shadowflame. So either because of the cost or because you don't have to sacrifice your own minions or health. So yeah, I like the card. Yeah, but I don't know if it will see play. It all depends on the deck that you put it into, and it all depends on the metagame as well.
No, I mean, obviously one of the closest comparisons I think is Consecrate. But again, it does hit your own minions, so you can't just play any minion. You do have to consider what else you're putting into this deck and what else it hits, but we found a beneficial one with Nerubian Egg. That's a perfect fit. I like this card. I think it's good. Right. Revenge. 2 mana, warrior card. Deal 1 damage to all minions. If you have 12 or less health, deal 3 damage instead. So it's a 2 mana whirlwind that if you have 12 or less health is a 3 power whirlwind instead of a 1 power one.
No.
Don't like it.
Yeah, from what I've seen from like the warrior players, they were very underwhelmed with this one. I'm kind of the same way. 12 or the 12 or less health conditional is really bad, because like when Mortal Strike was a thing in like the aggro warrior deck, you could play around it by just putting them to 13, and like if they axe themselves again, okay, whatever, they took even more damage. So if you're playing an aggressive deck and you're like, oh no, I might be dead to Revenge, like nobody's gonna play Revenge first of all. But I don't know. Warrior already has ways to go about clearing the board in pretty good ways.
I would have played this card if it cost 1, like the regular Whirlwind.
Oh yeah, of course, because then it's just better Whirlwind. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
it was obviously. I'm sure they tested that, and it was too good. Like, I think the 1 mana is too relevant. So
you can use it obviously in the control-based warrior deck, kind of as another AOE, but because it has the potential to just straight up clear the enemy board as well, no matter how big the minions are, because 3 damage is just so much more than 1 damage. And the problem though with that is that 12 health is a little bit of a downside. Being at 12 health is not really... Being at 12 health or lower is not really that easy to achieve. Usually you die before it, or you just don't get that low, right?
Yeah, I'm starting to think about Whirlwind, and a lot of people have already just trimmed 1 copy of Whirlwind from warrior decks because you don't have the room for it. Like, where do you have the room for this card? Like, what are you trying to accomplish with this card?
You don't.
And I guess for people that just want a lot of AoE effects, this is great, but
if you wanted 4 Whirlwinds, congrats! It's your lucky day.
Now you have 6 because you also got Deathspite. Yeah, I'm not convinced on this card. I think it's hitting the bin. Axe Flinger, 4 mana, 2/5. Whenever this minion takes 2 damage, deal 2 damage to the enemy hero. Yeah, I'm still not seeing it. I mean, Warrior has traditionally been a very heavy control class, and this is not what you want to do. If this was deal 2 damage to a random enemy thing, that would be great, but it doesn't do that. Where is this card fitting in? Like, I don't... This is another one that I feel like it's hitting the bin. Maybe that's sort of an indicator. I mean, Warrior's pretty darn strong right now.
The thing about Warrior is I think they got a lot of benefit from just the neutrals in this set. Like, the legendaries. Anytime you print legendaries, the first class you have to look at, it's like, where does this fit, this big dragon thing? Not a dragon deck, it's Warrior. You just put it in your Warrior deck. And so, I think it's not surprising that the class cards are a little weaker. They probably don't want to go over the top on this. And they're obviously very different. Like, this one's an aggressive card. So, even if this was good, it wouldn't really fit in your traditional Warrior deck. I don't think it's that good, though. So, I don't think it'll be in any Warrior deck.
Ekop.
Don't like this card at all. The stats, along with the effect that it provides, just don't really mesh up well. Usually you want... an effect like this might have been good on the minion with more attack, and maybe even less health. Like, I wouldn't mind less health if it meant that the minion stats-wise would provide more attack. It just wants you, just like with the Dark Patron, this card wants you to do some janky combos, which will end up not working once again.
Well, if you combine it with Whirlwind in Revenge, you're getting close to the 26 Whirlwind Axe Flinger deck, and then you can Whirlwind 5 times, and then they'll take 10 damage, and then they'll be at, I don't know, 13 after that, and then you have any minions left.
It, just like
Damn.
Patron.
Got him. Yeah, hitting the bin. Quick Shot, Hunter card, 2 mana, deal 3 damage. If your hand is empty, draw a card. Whoa! This card's great!
Chakki loves this card, am I right?
Yeah, this card... Actually, I was kind of surprised. My teammates in our Skype chat, they didn't like this card that much in Aggro Hunter.
What?
And I'm like,
what's not to like about this card?
I'm like, it's pretty good.
It's just a dark bomb that has an extra upside.
With the conditional that's, if you're in that late game gotta get 'em phase, you can quick shot for another card.
Gotta go fast.
And I like it a lot, but one of the issues we might have is actually fitting it into the Face Hunter deck. We were talking about, what do you remove? And it's maybe a Glaive Zuka, can we remove a 1-drop?
Wolf Rider.
The Hunter deck's pretty tight on space. Yeah, but this is worse than Wolf Rider a lot of the time.
I don't feel like it's too tight on space to not run this card.
I think I'm gonna run this card for sure. I'm gonna try it, and we'll see where it's at. Chat spamming SM Orc, we're gonna... there's going to be some tournament game where some guy is just on the ropes, and Frodan's sitting there casting, and he's like, well, if he draws quick shot into kill command, he's got him. and it'll happen.
Why can't I be the one casting? Thanks, Chakki.
So, my bad, Admirable. Admirable, your cast would go something like this.
Because Frodan's in everything.
So he's going to top that quick shot. That's a huge draw! Whoa!
It's just a giant meme at this point. I don't actually get excited because crazy things are happening. I just get excited for the sake of doing so. I'm glad that my friends have such high opinions of me. Ekop, what do you think of Quick Shot? And hopefully not what you think of me. Because apparently, yeah, I think Quick Shot's great.
I'm happy Hunter finally got a good class card. So
I love the card. It fits the Face Hunter very well. It gives you more... just more gas, basically. Usually it's so frustrating for aggressive decks in general, just dumping your whole hand and then, oh yeah, I guess I'll top deck this shitty card, I'll top deck this shitty card, and just being... You end up being in a hopeless situation often enough when you start top decking as the aggro deck, and Quickshot kind of prevents that from happening, because you can always get excited by, oh yeah, I drew this Quickshot, I can still do it, and you get more gas, you get more outs because of that to kill your opponent. It's a really good card for the aggressive deck. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, just 2 mana 3 damage. We've already seen that that's a very valuable thing to have. And when you tack on the extra ability, I'm not seeing really a downside to this. And if there's one thing Hunter wants to do, it's deal damage to face. Core Rager, 4 mana 4/4. Battlecry. If your hand is empty, gain +3/+3. Well, if we just chuck burn spells to their face like Quick Shot, we can just empty our hand and play a 4 mana 7/7.
And then lose to Big Game Hunter. Woo.
Oh.
One interesting thing, I think we saw this card first, and we just saw Quick Shot today. What I really liked about Quick Shot was they took this same mechanic, which isn't a very powerful mechanic, and they tacked it on to a good card. Like, if you just gave Dark Bomb to Hunter, we'd be like, it might not fit, but it's a good card. And then they added this small little mechanic that's a hunter mechanic, obviously, and it's pretty good. You know, like it's an above average card. But when you tack it onto a 4-mana 4/4, which ask yourself, would you play a 4-mana vanilla 4/4? No, never. So when you tack on this pretty bad mechanic, would you play it? No. So I like the fact that with Quick Shot they made a good card and added a small benefit, but with this card they made a bad card and added a small benefit, and it still doesn't push it over the edge at all.
Yeah, I agree. I think a card like this has so much potential. A mechanic like this has so much potential for aggressive decks, and with this effect, with this battle cry effect, they kind of blew it. I think if they added End Charge to the battle cry, then the card would have been pretty good.
I mean, I suppose if you want people to get like murdered on turn 5, yeah.
I think what the mechanic should be is if your hand is empty, do something and draw a card. Like that can be the new hunter thing, and so maybe you get these crazy combos going where you're top decking, but you string together 3 of these battle cries, and like maybe you have to tone down the buff effect. Maybe it's like, you know, if your hand is empty, gain +2/+2 and draw a card, and then it gets to the point where it's still not amazing. And you might have to make it +3 to make it BGHable, because that's obviously supposed to be sort of a downside as well.
I think it's supposed to be a downside.
It is supposed to be a downside as well. But I think where they should have gone with this effect is make it and draw a card on every single one. And you tune the rest of the card to make that balance, but that would add some interesting gameplay to this effect where a hunter's top decking, can they draw their, you know, quick draw effects?
But honestly, the card wouldn't even be that overpowered if it had, like, let's say +2/+2 and charge, right?
It'd be overpowered.
It wouldn't be really that overpowered, I think, because often enough, the scenario wouldn't actually happen that often, because
you would just build your deck differently. Like, I had a hunter deck where you had 18 1-drops, and you'd burn through your hand like nothing because you wanted to play. Was it powerful? No, but if you had a 7/7 charge, it'd be pretty good.
I think charge is a little bit much. You can't just reprint Leroy only for hunters. Like, it's just not the way things work. I like where your heart is, where you want hunters to be able to kill people, but they do a pretty damn good job at it right now.
Even I think that's too much Ekop play.
I mean, often enough.
Charge.
I just
oh,
think
you're great, man.
I just think that often enough you don't even get the benefit of the +3/+3 because it's so difficult to set up.
Sure, you don't.
If it had charge, you would make sure that.
Yeah, you would just jam in a bunch of 1-drops. You're like, sure, 1/2s, we got it. Oh, 7/7 charge, get him, yeah.
Obviously, it wouldn't be +3/+3 in charge.
Well, that's a nerf though, because then they can't even big game hunter it. Then you're just staring at a 6/6, and you're like, ah! This is the worst fight ever. Yeah, okay, so 4-mana 7/7.
The second one, you're just like, get him!
It's a moderate card. I think it definitely has some potential to be used. But sort of as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, in terms of like replacement stuff, if you can't afford every single legendary in the game, but you still want big cards, this actually might be one of those ones you look at. Because emptying your hand with Hunter, frankly, is not that difficult, and this can give you some extra gas. Like, it's an alternative to something like when you play Savannah Highmane, you typically have to be scaling your board position by playing, you know, cards that cost 4 mana and 5 mana, and then, you know, keep the board stabilized up until Savannah Highmane. Now you can just kind of, you know, blow your entire hand, not really too much about it, and then hopefully you have this 7/7 at the end of the day. So something to think about if you possibly don't have every single card in your collection and you're looking for a big minion that maybe can
craft for Savannah Highmane. It's 100 dust.
Shh. We're talking about getting to the Savannah Highmane point. Not everyone wants to play 5-drops. Druid cards. Druid of the Flame. 3 mana 2/2. Choose one. Transform into a 5/2 minion or a 2/5 minion. I feel like making a Magma Rager probably isn't the greatest way to go.
I want chat to spam F if they feel bad for Magma Rager, because this card's directly better. I'm a little sad.
Whoa, you can't play this card in Priest.
I'm just sad for Magma Rager, man.
Poor Magma Rager. This card seems not too very good or exciting to me.
Chat is spamming F.
Yeah. Poor Magma Rager. Ekop, what do you think?
Yeah, the transform options are not really good. Even I don't know when you would ever want a 5/2 except if you give it charge, I guess.
I don't know when you would ever want to find
It's
two.
like, just give it charge.
Just give it charge. I embrace the face hunter way. Okay, Chakki.
I wonder why it doesn't have taunt on the 2/5
That's
version.
what I'm.
That's such a druid thing.
I don't get it. Like, I don't understand where this card. Like, what? Why? Like,
It's so
it's called
mediocre.
Druid of the Flame, and there's no flames happening. Like, we're not dealing any damage. He's not AoEing when he explodes. Or I guess the flame version is the 5/2. But what's the 2/5 now? The 2/5's not a flame.
That's the mediocre version. Well, both of them are.
I don't get it.
I don't get it either.
All right, whatever. Not a very good card.
I don't
expect to see
understand
play.
Blizzard's obsession with Druid of the something, but
Why wouldn't I just play Spider Tank? I don't know. I probably would. Volcanic Lumberer, 9 mana, 7/8 taunt. Costs 1 less for each minion that died this turn. Oh, jeez. I like this mechanic. I love the cost modifying mechanic, but it's so dangerous, and I understand why this guy costs 9 mana.
Kind of sucks on Druid. Because Druid, we know that it's not really good at clearing the board, except if you play something like Poison Seeds. And, yeah. I
Poison
guess,
Seeds, Starfall, Volcanic Lumberer. Bam.
yeah, then it might be okay, but even
that
then,
actually works.
I don't like. In general, as what you want to do with Druid is not really. Yeah, you can't clear the board very well with spells, and if you're trading with your minions, usually your minions shouldn't be dying, so you don't get as much of a cost reduction as you would like to. So I don't think Volcanic Lumberer will be played.
Dude, we gotta give this card charge, is what chat's saying.
I think if this card had charge, it'd be totally fair. It'd be totally fine.
Force of nature into whatever.
I don't like this card. I think objectively it's pretty terrible. It dies to Black Knight, Big Game Hunter. And so if it were to ever be relevant enough, it would just be hated out. I don't even think it's relevant enough to get the hate, though. Like, when you're playing Big Game Hunter, I don't think you're targeting Volcanic Lumberer.
You're not.
You just happen to catch it in the line of fire, so... This card's awful.
My weakness, a short dwarf with a gun.
I think they're definitely kind of testing out, like you said, this mechanic, and it's a very dangerous one, so to give it to a very powerful card is hard.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with this, is that cost modifiers are traditionally, again, they're very powerful in other card games, and Hearthstone's no exception to that. Innervate and Preparation still, they're two of the best cards in the game. And with a card like Volcanic Lumber, I mean, it has a built-in cost modifier effect that's on a body.
I think the difference is built-in cost modifiers are weaker in Constructed because you can abuse how you want to use the other modifiers. So, like, imagine if Innervate was built into, Dalaran Mage. Well, sure, that's nice, but I'd rather Innervate out, a Shade of Maximus.
Sure.
So, like, since it's built into the shitty 7/8 taunt, it's a lot worse than it could be on, like, other cards. And so, compared to the 6/4 Drake with the same ability, I really dislike this one. Especially since it's 3 more mana.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see. I think you are right that they're trying to not go overboard with it, and I think it's a good thing because, again, just it's so scary to be playing free minions. And this one is basically never going to get free outside of Poison Seed Starfall or something like that. But I don't think he's terrible. I don't think he's great, but he's very average, is what I feel like, and that just seems to be where Druid's at right now. I mean, this guy
Pretty good in Arena.
Yeah, this guy's not bad in Arena either. Actually, a 3-mana 2/5, pretty darn good, and then 7/8 taunt. It's like another Iron Bark Protector. I'm happy about it.
Oh yeah, Druid's cards are great. They're okay in Arena.
Flamewaker, 3-mana 2/4. After you cast a spell, deal 2 damage, randomly split among all enemies. Wow, that seems really good. Stuff like with Arcane Missiles, even with Mirror Entity. I'm sorry, Mirror Image.
Yeah, it seems pretty powerful. The downside is obviously card disadvantage because you have to run weaker cards. You have to run 1-mana spells. It synergizes well with spare parts, but one concern people have brought up is, you already Mech Mage is already cutting like 3-drops. So how do you fit this card in? Fit in Tinkertown Technician still, but keep enough mechs through like Spider Tank and stuff that you can get the spare parts and get the synergies, and fit in those spells. And so it's getting to the point where it's almost impossible to make the mech Flame Waker dream. But in like a Tempo Mage strategy with Unstable Portal, maybe Flame Cannon, Frostbolt, stuff like that, it could be okay. I'm not entirely sold. I think this is one that might be a little overhyped. But it's definitely not bad.
Ekop.
I like to compare this card to something like Ship's Cannon, for example, in a way that it has potential, but you need to play. I don't know. You need to adjust your deck in a way that it makes your deck worse, I think, in general. So, yeah, with Ship's Cannon it was playing Pirates, which made the deck worse, and with Flame Maker, it's playing like a lot of spare parts or cheap mage spells, which generally you don't prefer over those more expensive mage spells. I don't know. The card has potential, but I don't really like it that much.
Here's what I'm picturing. Clockwork Gnome on turn 1. They play a guy, you play Knife Juggler, run your Clockwork Gnome into their guy.
Knife Juggler!
They play a guy, you play Flame Waker, you coin, and then you mirror image.
Okay, so you have coin.
Just saying.
Come on, man.
Just saying. We got some potential plays with this guy. This card with the coin is really, really, really good.
That's another thing, is like, they keep introducing these cards that work well with the coin, and it's like 50% of the time the card's really good. 50% of the time it's, okay.
Man, I like this guy. I think he's great. Now that I'm thinking about, 50% of the time he's really good. And then, the other 50% of the time he's pretty good if you have the right spells to combo with him. I think this card is going to be played. And I would expect to see this guy in a lot of tournaments.
I think this card has potential, but it has to sell me first. I don't know.
I'm waiting for the first Cholden highlight where 68 missiles end up getting fired in one turn. Oh, and here's a great card that it can go with. Dragon's Breath. 5 mana spell, deal 4 damage, costs 1 less for each minion that died this turn. Another cost modifier effect. So if you manage to pick off enough of their 1/1 minions, with Flame Waker, you can just blast their big one with this one.
How many 1/1s is your opponent playing?
They just Implosion for 4.
Did they Dark Whispers? Did they double innervate out Dark Whispers?
Your opponent is 6-0, and they just Implosioned you for 4.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And you're just gonna Dragon's Breath them to the dome? You're just like, give me that extra damage.
You already killed all their 1/1s.
That's my issue with the card, is like, you've already killed all their guys, apparently, to cast it in the first place. So now are you just pointing it at their face? Using a card to deal 4 damage?
It seems totally fine. If you Flame Strike away a bunch of small guys, then you can pick off the last big guy with this one.
I'm not a big fan of the card.
Ekop's shaking his head too. Man, you guys are haters. This card's awesome.
No, this card sucks.
Come on, man.
If it cost less, it would be good. But 5 mana, you have to compare it to other cards that cost like 5. How many minions do you have to kill to make this card worth the mana that it will cost?
You have to kill 3.
You have to kill 3, basically, right?
You have to kill 2 if you compare it to Shadow Bolt, which is a shitty card. So, I don't like that comparison. Because
Whoa, hang on. Shadow Bolt can never go face. That's why it's not a good card.
Right. Okay, but 3... Would you play a 3 mana 4 damage spell? No. You'd play a 2 mana 4 damage spell
obviously
every day
not,
of the week.
but... Right, that's the whole point, is that you're trying to generate extra from this card.
3 minions is the break point, is what I'm saying, not 2. Some people are saying it's 2. I disagree. You would not play the card if it costed 3. You'd play it if it costed 2 or less. And so, when it hits 2 is when it's good. When it hits 1 is when it's, like, really good. Then it's basically a really good Soulfire. And when it hits 0 is when it's amazing, because it's pre-nerf Soulfire.
One of the things that I'm looking at with this card is, at a certain point, you do hit critical mass with the amount of cards that can be pointed at your opponent's face for damage. And right now you have Frostbolt, and you have Fireball, and you have Ice Lance. Like, if you keep printing damage cards that go to the face, eventually you get to these points where you can just build...
burn deck.
Yeah, you just build burn decks and chuck burn spells.
Yeah, but then how are you killing their minions?
Flame Strike. Like, that's how you recover
You're just playing Flame Strike in your burn deck.
That's how you recover the board position. Like, because your opponent's just going to play minions and start smacking you in the face.
That's not how the burn decks have traditionally worked, though. Like,
it's not how they've traditionally worked.
If you look at Tiddler Celestial's like Burn Mage, he doesn't play AoE, he plays freeze effects.
Also, burn burn decks aren't necessarily never going to play with minions either. Like, Mana Worm obviously fits very well into that strategy.
Yeah, but how often are you trading? Like, the one thing burn decks need to do in this game to work is go face. You cannot trade SM Orc and stuff, you know.
What about when they play Sludge Belcher? I'm
Okay,
just
so
saying, I don't think it's that bad. And I think there's a reason it costs 5. I don't think they just made it cost 5 for no reason.
Yeah, right, but I don't think it's that good.
And Ekop
I think
did
the
same
card.
with it.
I think the card costing 5 is a little bit overpriced. 4 would be fine. And I mean, what are you gonna do with it? You're gonna usually you have, in order to clear a big minion with it, you have to either spend 5 mana or you have to trade a bunch of stuff in, or even worse, spend mana to kill that stuff first. So it doesn't even matter if your Dragon's Breath gets cheaper. I don't like it. And for them, like let's say you clear the board with a Flame Strike or something like that. Doing 4 to the face for 0 mana, is it really worth it? I don't think so.
There you go, Pilot Shredder minions. I don't think it's that bad, but I'm outnumbered 2-1, so I have to concede the point. You guys win.
Get
Dragon
wrecked.
Breath sucks. You guys got it.
You want to make a bet?
Every card sucks. I do want to make a bet. I think Dragon's Breath is going to see play at some point.
Okay, what are we betting?
I mean, you can set the term. You're the one who wants to bet.
This is like the worst bet for me because some idiot's going to play it in their deck. I'll say it's never going to be in a tournament winners lineup.
Yeah, I definitely will take that bet. And
Okay.
We'll set the end for the World Championships. After the World Championships, if no one has won an event with a Dragon's Breath in their deck,
A reasonable sized event, like a real event. Not like an online piece of shit, like small tournament.
here we go. The loser has to disenchant one of their golden legendaries.
$10,000 event or more. Okay?
No. That's way
total
too
price
much.
pool.
No.
Total price pool.
No way.
That's
5,000.
not way too much.
5,000.
That gives you at least like 10 to 20 chances.
No, because then Pinnacle can't be used. 5,000.
You know some guy that hates me is just gonna put one.
Here we
into his deck?
go. A guy that wins $1,000 or more as a first place event. $1,000 is a lot of money for Hearthstone. If
Well,
someone,
I mean 10,000 total, like not.
no.
first
I don't
place.
want 10,000 total because 10,000 total it
I want
excludes a lot of
5,000
events.
total.
No, I want $1,000 first prize or more.
Do
And
it, Chakki.
It has to be a land, okay? Not
No,
online.
it doesn't have to be a land. Because a land event is by definition almost always going to be $10,000 or more. You're trying to rig this in your favor.
I know,
$1,000 or more
that's the
first
terms
prize.
that I want.
Well, you're not going to get those terms.
You're obviously not confident in the card because you don't think it's going to
Are
win
you
a real event.
are
think
you
it's
saying
gonna
a
win
guy
small event?
are you saying a guy winning $1,000 first prize is not a relevant event?
No.
Okay, well you're out of your mind then. Solemn Vigil, 5-mana Paladin card, draw 2 cards.
I'm comparing this to like the Root Invitation. So you're not taking the bet. The viewers want you to take the bet.
I can't take a bet that's so stacked in your favor that it's almost impossible for me to win because there's only like 7 events during the course of the year that host a $10,000 or more prize pool. $1,000 first prize, man. Come
I'll
on.
take the bet. So we're disenchanting a golden legendary of the winner's choice.
You have the winner's choice, and you're crafting only golden angry chickens with the dust.
Gotcha. We're taking it. $1,000 first place. This card will never win a tournament. It's garbage.
Yep. All right. I can't wait to see you craft those golden angry chickens from your Sylvanas, man.
So Worlds is the finisher.
After Worlds, that's when the bet's concluded.
You know you're really gonna be sweating when Worlds rolls around. You're like, I really hope some idiot wins the tournament with this card.
Solemn Vigil, 5 mana, draw 2 cards, cost 1 less for each minion that died this turn. Sort of in the same vein of all these cost modifiers we're being seeing. These are overpriced for a reason, and it's because it's not hard to create the circumstance, especially with something like Paladin. I mean, you're gonna have Haunted Creepers, you have Muster for Battle available. There's a lot of ways to activate this card. The question I'm seeing is, how does this compare versus something like Divine Favor?
It's better, I'd say, because
Way better.
you can make it I think in Paladin's one of the best classes for this effect because you make so many small units that you trade in, and it works so well with like their theme, and it works really well with Chromaggus. And I just think this card is actually pretty good. It kind of fits into what they want to do.
That's right. You will always have a lot of minions thanks to Hero Power and Master for Battle, and you just trade them in because that's what Paladin does. And then you can play this for like 2 or 1 mana, and it's really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. I think, again, Haunted Creeper and Muster for Battle are really giving this card a lot of leverage for how to utilize it in Paladin. And drawing cards is something that every class wants a way to do, and Paladin, frankly, does not have a lot of consistent ones. Like, outside of utilizing Jeeves, which obviously greatly affects your deck building, or using Divine Favor, which, again, is usually going to greatly affect your deck building, you don't have a way to do it. Like, Azure Drake just doesn't fit very well into Paladin. So I think this card's going to find a nice spot. Now, my biggest question is whether or not this is a 1 of or a 2 of, how greedy you can get with it, and how much of an impact it's going to have, because you do have to find something to cut from your deck when you're fitting this in as well. But I expect this to be played.
Yeah, definitely.
Dragon Consort. I guess this is the one you guys have been talking about. 5 mana, 5/5, battle cry. The next dragon you play costs 2 less. Whoa! This guy is awesome!
Yeah, he is.
I don't know. I think we should give it charge, guys.
Not necessary.
Wow,
I mean,
this guy's sick!
A 5/5 for a 5/5 for 5 mana, giving you that pint-sized summoner pre-nerf pint-sized summoner buff permanently, kind of.
It's the next dragon you play. Like, you don't have to play it this turn. You don't have to play it next turn. It's just whenever you play it, the next one costs 2 less.
Yep.
Yeah. You can wait all you want with that.
Turn 5 this, turn 6 Chromaggus.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really strong. I mean,
really
good.
Dragon Consort will definitely see a lot of play, and Paladin is the card that makes Paladin the go-to dragon class.
Yeah, and it's giving you all the if you have a dragon in your hand, do X things. Wow, this guy is awesome.
Yep.
We get dragon deck, and it's a dragon that can't be PGH'd! Yes!
Whoa!
Dragon's weakness aren't always a guy with a gun and a beard. That's
like,
awesome.
You get a 2-mana hungry dragon with this guy.
Now you're making me think.
Like,
I'm playing Paladin Dragon.
It's just super powerful in a class that's already really powerful.
This guy's great, man.
I mean, Paladin has been losing some popularity, I would say, but it definitely will make a strong comeback with those 2 cards that we previewed right now.
Wow, what great stuff. Expect this one to be in decks, because that one is
Who at Blizzard that's working there just loves Paladin.
All
There's
of
some
them?
guy. Yeah, it's just all of them. They're like, I don't know, this card seems a little too powerful. Just print it.
Wow,
Justice!
This is the last one, too. What a coincidence that was. Wow, this is... I think this is... Is this better than... is this better than...
Emperor has more reach, is the issue.
Yeah, Emperor.
So, like, if you compare Lotheb to, like, a class card, like, Lotheb's gonna seem better because it just has more reach across the game, so you'll see it more often, and it'll have more impact overall. This is only gonna be in one class, so in one deck of that class. So I think overall Emperor is, like, the bigger impact to look out for, and it's gonna change... The other thing, it's gonna change the way the game's played. Like, it's a new mechanic. So I think Emperor overall is the biggest impacting card of the set.
All right. Man, this is good stuff. Ekop, what's your favorite card in the set? And what do you expect to be the best class within a short duration after release?
I would definitely say Paladin. A lot of people will be dabbling around with the Dragon Consort, and in general, my favorite card would be the Emperor. It just allows so many different possibilities. It just makes your mid-range decks or control decks that much better. It makes combo decks insane, and allows for combos that weren't even possible before because of your limitations with the 10 mana crystals. So, yeah, this card definitely, the Emperor will definitely make a huge impact, I would say. And yeah, because of the Dragon Consort, I think Paladin got a huge buff.
I think Hunter is just going to be the best class.
Just because it's Hunter?
Easily. Like, people are going to be messing around with all these random decks that are, like, so greedy in late game, and I'm just going to be punch on. You know,
I'm kind of disappointed that
anyone
Warrior...
who's serious and not, like, playing for fun for the first week this set comes out, you want to jam Face Hunter on ladder.
So that's how you climb a ladder anyway. You just jam Face Hunter.
Exactly.
I'm kind of disappointed that Warrior and Druid didn't get much love. It seems like they didn't get any playable cards. Like, both the cards for Warrior and both the cards for Druid just seem to suck ass.
Yeah, Druid and Warrior I definitely don't think got too much love in this one. But I can understand why. I mean, 2 pretty powerful classes.
They're very neutral dependent as well, so their love can come out of non-class cards.
All right, Chakki, so your favorite card in the set and what you think is going to be best. You said it's Hunter.
I like Hunter. I think my favorite card overall is the Gang Up card, and Quick Shot is a close second.
Yeah, I think Quick Shot's going to be really good.
Quick Shot's good. Gang Up might be okay. I don't think it's that great.
Someone has to build the right deck for it.
Yeah, it's an awesome card design-wise, I think.
Yeah, my favorite card is Dragon Egg. I'm kidding. This card's not my favorite card. Mine's just Dragon Consort, man. This is awesome.
Dude, you just like overpowered stuff.
It's got a great art. It's got a very efficient body on it, and it's giving you extra mana so you can keep playing cool dragons. What a fantastic design. My favorite card's gonna be Dragon's Breath after I make you disenchant one of your golden legendaries and craft golden angry chickens.
Dude, Dragon's Breath sucks.
Yeah, say what you... Hater, man. Keep hating. Alright, well guys, that's going to conclude the card review for us. If you missed any of this, I am going to put it up on YouTube. It ran a little bit longer than I expected. This actually took about 2 hours. So I'll have a video up there for you guys, and you can check it out if you missed any of the neutral stuff, because that was the first stuff that we did. So, of course, big thanks to Chakki and Ekop for helping do this card review with me. And Chakki, you have any shout-outs or any last words for anyone?
Yeah, shout out to the chat for all the dank memes that we came up with throughout this. You know, we'll just throw charge on every card. And shout out to my team, Team Dignitas. Check us out on Twitter, Twitch, wherever. And thanks for watching.
Ekop?
Yeah, shout out to you guys for having me as well, obviously, and shout out to Trump for hosting us as well. That's it.
All right, cool. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for joining me, and of course, a big thank you to Trump, who showing his appreciation for the channel. Always a nice guy, man. No wonder you baked cookies for him during fight night. So yeah, thank you guys for joining me. I am going to play some stuff after this, though, so if you guys want to stick around for the stream, feel free to do so, but I'm going to take a short break while we're doing that. And again, after the stream is over today, I'm going to get this video edited and put it up on YouTube as quickly as possible. And if you guys want to check that out, one of the easiest ways to do that is to follow me on Twitter. That's @ThatsAdmirable, and of course I have a website where it's going to be posted to as well. It's ThatsAdmirable.com, and all of my stuff, you know, Facebook, YouTube, everything is ThatsAdmirable. Really easy to find. So thank you guys so much for watching, and stick around if you want to see the stream. We'll be right back with some more Hearthstone stuff.